Like I said, you got the bad stuff.
Welcome, everybody, to the City of Farmers Branch City Council Study Session for Tuesday, March 19th. Our first order of business is item A1, which is to discuss regular agenda items. Councilman Merritt.
Thank you, Mayor. I suspect there will be a little bit of discussion amongst the rest of the council on I2, the city policy for decorum. I appreciate the attorneys and the city manager bringing these forward in order to get them into language that we can all follow and be aware of and eliminate any confusion. I do have a couple of questions related to, we talk about in district and with out of district. Are we only I'm sorry, I think it says, get my note. A meeting in section 1, we talk about a meeting in a council district other than for the district which such member is elected. How does that apply if that meeting occurs outside of the city? Are we limited with that language?
That's a good catch. Good catch.
So that's really my only feedback on this, and I'm interested to hear what others have to say, and I'd be willing to move this off of consent if it needed further discussion, but I'm not making that request at the moment. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no questions about the agenda, but given Councilman Merritt's call out, are you suggesting that language change to conducting a meeting regarding a district other, or keeping it?
I'm simply allowing the attorneys to reword that and see what that comes back to. I'm not making a suggestion. I think we were limiting that in my observation.
Understood.
That's all.
Okay.
We could table this for a period of
I
time.
would favor
I'm
that.
interested, as I said.
But we'll go around and hear what everybody has to say.
Yeah, and so I'll just echo that. I'd agree that we just remove it from consent and wait for that language change to come back.
Okay. Anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Baird?
Nothing, thank you.
Councilwoman Burton?
I had asked how much time had been put into this, since it is unenforceable and it's a First Amendment scenario for our residents. Quite frankly, they can speak to whomever they'd like.
Talk about the same.
Absolutely, the same consent agenda. And, you know, at a billable rate of $200 an hour, I just don't feel like that is, for something that is unenforceable, I'm kind of tired of spending that kind of money for something like that. So that's my 2 cents worth on that.
Okay. Councilman Roman?
Yes, so I'd like for I2 to be taken off of consent as well into a regular discussion. I'd also like to have a discussion about that specific item in executive session to seek legal counsel from our attorney about that item.
I'm going to ask the city attorney, is that something that can be
Yeah.
discussed in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can always go into executive session, get legal advice on any agenda item.
Then why don't we may I suggest this, that since there are so many concerns, why don't we just table this and we can have this on executive session for the next meeting, and have that set up to discuss in 2 weeks, whatever, and then move forward. I don't know that we're under a time crunch on this particular item.
What would be the difference in discussing it today versus in 2 weeks?
Do you want to well, it would be breaking our meeting, going into executive session to discuss it.
Would it be a violation to do that?
No, we can have an executive session. We can do it the same time we take up the other matter as well.
Oh, we can?
We have another.
Since it's not on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I didn't know.
The council has the right to go into executive session, get legal advice
Okay.
on any agenda item, even though we don't post that particular agenda item.
Okay, I didn't know that. I thought it had to be posted, so, okay. So we can do that.
Okay, cool. And that's it for me.
So we're going to,
So when you read it in executive session later, you want to ring in the executive session statement in addition to the other executive session items. You'll read them both.
okay. And let me just make a note so we don't do E1 and I2. Okay, got it. Very good, thank you. Next up is A2, discuss maintenance of medians located in the Mercer North subdivision and provide direction to staff.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Robert Diaz, Parks and Rec Director. I've had Mark Moffett here, our Park Superintendent. I've also got Jessica Alvarado, our Recreation Superintendent. I've got also a couple of guests here in the meeting this afternoon. I've got Michael Morgan with Essex Property Management, hands up behind you, and also Renisha Darden with Essex, with the HOA, the Mercer HOA. And I'll go ahead and call Colleen Rulli in. We'll talk about Oak Brook. This Mercer County will merge in the Oak Brook discussion, so I'll go ahead and introduce Colleen too. And she represents the HOA with Oak Brook. So, and we'll go ahead and start. Okay. Just some background on Mercer North medians. The location, I have a location map as part of the presentation, is Mercer Parkway and Whittington Place. The medians currently are maintained by the Mercer North HOA. Mercer North HOA residents pay for the median maintenance as part of their HOA assessment. The city manager, Parks and Rec staff, Public Works staff met with council members Roman and Bennett Burton and representatives with Essex. It was Michael and Renisha on March 6th to discuss current median operations and logistics. And anytime any of you need ask a question, just let me know. So this is the location map. This is Whittington Place, and all the highlighted areas are the areas they currently maintain. And these would be areas that we would discuss as part of a city taking responsibilities for these at some point. And these are just some discussion points. And I'll kind of go through these, and then I've got some, and if you have questions on these, just let me know. So the city estimated cost to maintain the Mercer North medians, we have some startup costs. So the first year we'd have some staff and equipment like a truck and trailer. We'd also have, all the equipment that comes with maintaining those medians, so weed eaters, those kind of things. We'd also be looking at the irrigation, taking over that, weed control. And then there's also some specific items in those medians. There's, depending on the plant material, the trees, things like that. So in addition to the startup costs, we also have we've estimated some water costs there. So for a total of $365,000. What I do want to point out is that for that crew would be assigned to that area, but it would also be maintaining other parts of the city as well. So it's not just for work there in the Mercer area. And then if you go down some of the second year costs, you of course take some of the equipment off, and then you've just got maintenance of that area. In addition, so that 255 that's listed there, that's kind of the ongoing maintenance costs. But then, like I said, that crew would do other items, other maintenance within the city. We're estimating right now that this crew would probably work in this area 25-30% of the time. It's a lot. Those are pretty large medians. It's a lot of area to maintain. So Mercer North HOA residents pay about $300 annually in HOA dues for the median maintenance, irrigation maintenance, and the maintenance. So they have 4 development monuments in that area. That's part of this HOA. And then there's also a sculpture located on one of the median areas. We have got some feedback from the HOA, and right now, the reduction from that 300 annual due would be about I think it's $96.94, which take that annual down to $103.06. And because they still would have to maintain some areas like the monument areas and things like that. So that's a pretty substantial reduction. We also looked at some costs, and it's not part of this, but one of the things we looked at was how would that equate to, say, a 1 cent tax rate. So for example, to reduce, and so currently right now that the residents pay that $300. And so if you wanted to take a tax deduction, it would be about a 7.5 cent. We worked with Tammy Zimmerman, our finance director, be about a 7.5 cent tax reduction would equate to about $300. So, so that's a pretty substantial when you look at if they're reducing it $200 to really just $100 a year. That's a pretty substantial drop. So Mercer North HOA and Essex staff are exploring possibility of providing the city some funding from their current HOA fund that could be utilized for the startup costs. Right now, we didn't have it, when I did the presentation, put this together, we didn't have an exact amount, but I just talked with Michael earlier today. It'd probably be about $120,000 is what they're looking at. That's what they currently budget for their maintenance for the year. And that's what's already approved by the HOA. So that's kind of what they're looking at as an amount that we could possibly use for startup costs. The median maintenance was part of the original development agreement, and that's why they've been maintaining it since it's in. I think the residential got with planning, Sarah, and planning, and I know the residential portion of Mercer, I think originally it was supposed to all be commercial, came in about 2017. So that's when we started looking at some residential in that area. I think, let me just look and see if I have any. Let's see, we got one more slide. So some pathways forward.
Hey, Rob, before
Yes.
you go that far, I'm sorry, we'll
Sure.
go back to that slide one more time. I just want to make sure you're qualifying on those startup costs and the budget request Parks was getting ready to make for staffing and qualifying that difference in cost, because right now it looks like a very large number. But can you tell us where we're at in the budget process and how this is interacting with it? So some of these costs, I believe, no matter what, we're going to have some changes coming. So can you please
Correct.
clarify
So-
that 345, the 235 moving forward
Okay.
in relation to the budget and staffing based on where we're going? Before this even happened, this discussion came up. Can you clarify that for us, please?
So we were actually in discussion with the city manager about possibly adding, our focus has been the last couple of years just project. We were really heavily project. We still did, of course, our median maintenance. So we were trying to look at a refocus to doing more median maintenance. And so we were going to ask for a couple positions in the next budget process. So this is somewhat in line with asking for the two. We still see that they would probably need, additional staffing with that. But, and like I said earlier, this would be toward, this crew would actually do other work in that area besides the Mercer maintenance. So does that clarify? I don't know if that clarifies it
So
or
for
not.
the council, I just want to make sure we're clear here. Parks has been in need of help for a while. And so in this budget process, I'd cleared them to ask for that help. As this discussion started maturing, it's like, wait, you already need help just to catch up. And then now we're considering adding more to it. So the right answer for staff to make this work, if council goes in this direction, was to add an independent crew that will absorb anything that's different on medians for both set of medians. So this cost is actually going to bleed over to both sets of discussions because they're already behind. But in addition to that, by adding this crew, they can then absorb the work of the two that we were trying to ask for in the budget because they were falling behind with that. There hasn't been a focus on medians in recent years. You've all seen that, and you've all raised a little bit of concern about where the median's going. So to make the budget request in alignment with it, I just want to make sure you're clear that we're not saying the Mercer medians cost $235,000 per year. That's all the medians plus rebalancing parks for the work that we're asking them to do that's been over, above, and beyond, looking at their organizational structure. And so it's the best way to be respectful of the council, not say 5 positions. It was, how can we do this balanced and respect what we're trying to do here? And so it's really important that I clarify that those numbers look large, and they are, but that's because Parks is asking for help already. So it's really some sunk costs that are in there as well. I can't add more already when they're already behind. So it's balancing those so y'all can see where it's going. I just want to make sure I've clarified that difference. Even if you look at the other medians that are being discussed, again, Parks still needs help. So no matter what, part of our budget request for next year to council would have been 2 staff members in Parks. But if we're doing this way, they really need their own crew and supervisor to supervise that crew that's purely focused on this. And it'd also be a heavy focus on District 1 and the west side as far as different projects like Squire Parks, Mercer Park, the parks that are coming online, because we keep adding to the list of what Parks is doing. Even though we've taken some stuff off with the easements and other things we were maintaining, the workload and also getting medians back where they need to be. So I just want to make sure we're clear on this one. It's a complicated number, and it's hard to dissect it to what it really is, but what's happening here is you're seeing a budget request morph into a larger discussion with medians if we move forward as well.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So you also alluded to something equating to about 7 cents.
Correct.
Can you go back and cover that again? Because I did not follow that logic at all.
So let me give you, so Tammy ran some numbers, and so I can just let you guys know that. So if you look at we looked at probably a typical house in Mercer area, it'd be about a $500,000 house, so $500,000. And if you did a 20% homestead exemption, that assessed value would be about $400,000. At the current tax rate, that would be, which is the 0.569, you'd be looking at $2,276, okay, for the annual. Let me get my other number here. So if you, and that equates to, so if you reduce that by 0.075, then that takes you down, and that's a $300 decrease. So if you reduce that tax rate to 0.494, your annual is $1,976. So that's where you get that $300. If you're looking at, if they pay an HOA fees $300, that reduction, it would take a 7.5 cent reduction to equate to that annual.
So essentially, what he's trying to say is that the 7.5 cents equates to the $300 that the residents in that area are paying on top of their taxes of 7.5
Okay,
cents.
I just got that. But then there are other things that the HOA fee of $300 pays for,
Correct.
in addition to just mowing and maintenance.
Well, they have
Foreclosures.
it's primarily median. So out of the 300, about 200 of it is for median. About 100 of it is to other maintenance for some monuments that are out there as well. And they'll have to continue paying for some of that. So it doesn't eliminate the HOA fee, at least at this point. And I mean, we can maybe let Michael speak to that as
You
well.
are correct, yes. Yeah. There's some additional maintenance responsibilities outside of the scope that we discussed.
All right.
Hey, Michael, could you mind giving us your full name and address just for the record real quick to everybody in the room? Give me
Sure.
your work address.
Sure. Michael Morgan, 4570 West Grove, Addison, Texas.
Thank you.
So this is the kind of some pathways forward. There's options of the city taking over the medians and maintenance, maintain the per city standard, the city taking over the medians, and the HOA pays for the possible utilities like maintenance, repair, and irrigation. The city takes over the medians and maintains them to HOA standards. And then, of course, there's the option of no change. And I want to kind of just also point out that there is kind of a blur between city standard and HOA standard, so I want to just clarify that. So what I would say is an HOA standard is what we currently have out there. So all those medians were put in by the developer and developed, to a standard that fits the neighborhood. So our goal would be to keep that level of maintenance. Really anything above and beyond that, so say, I'm just trying to take an example. So say there's a planting bed that the HOA would like to have different than what's already there, that would be something we could go to maybe the HOA at some point and look at maybe some partnership or some cost share on that. Or see if that's something we could do and, as through our own budget. It just kind of depends. But, so when I say city standard, I mean, our city standard is typical that we do in any other median. We're mowing it, we're trimming it, we're, spraying it, applicating, and, trimming trees, all that good stuff. So we would continue to do that to our level of maintenance for the west side and these Mercer medians. So, is there any questions on that? Yes, sir.
Are you finished?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's no
Okay.
questions on that. That's where I'm at.
All
Questions?
right, I want to go around before I give or ask my questions. So Councilman Merritt?
So Robert, just to clarify on the city standard versus the HOA standard, we're also talking about planting new plants in the city standard as well, right? Or are we not? You didn't mention that, so I want to clarify what I heard and have you have the opportunity to respond.
Yes, sir. So what we would look at is, there's currently a pretty, a wide range of plantings within those medians. They're well-developed at this point. They've been in for a few years. What we would do is maintain it. So say there's plants that have died, we would replace those. That's how they're doing it now. So the current HOA, so if they've had, we've had some issues with freezing and things like that. So they've gone in to make some of those repairs of the current area. They are not really looking at developing any new landscape beds and things like that. So we would maintain it to the current level that it's already at. We would just basically take it and keep that train moving. So that's
That
how.
would be called the city standard?
That would be our city, yes. Our city standard would be just taking over what they've got, what they've developed. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for the clarification. I don't have any questions at the moment. I may come back with some.
Councilman Jackson?
Thank you, Robert. Realizing that Oak Brook is on the agenda
Yes,
for
sir.
discussion coming up, are there other HOA neighborhoods with medians that the city maintains other than Oak Brook?
For this specific qualifier on a public street, not that we're aware of, we'll always double check everything before moving forward, but these were the two that were on public streets and had a median being privately maintained by an HOA. You're going to find other instances of private streets with private medians, but it's on a private street. So
Right.
the qualifier we're using for this one is it's a public street. The median's enjoyed by all, in theory. So public street, public's going it, they're seeing these medians.
Right.
Where the other ones are private streets, not meant for the public to go on. So the qualifier we use to identify these locations, and a lot of help from the west side on identifying this, Councilman Roman on this one was, these are public streets that are wrapping these medians. And so you see a lot of public and you have a specific group paying for it, but the utility and benefits for anyone on the road. So any of us driving over there, whereas in theory, we're not driving down private streets.
So the street, so Brookhaven Club Drive that goes through Brookhaven Country Club, beginning at Webb Chapel, going to Marsh, has a median, but Brookhaven area does not have an HOA.
Not that I'm aware
So
of.
that median is a city-maintained median, which is very similar to medians in Mercer Crossing and medians throughout Oak Brook.
Correct. Well, on public streets, yes. I just
Public
I just always
streets.
want to qualify public
Public
streets.
streets, right, right. Okay. So just to make sure that I'm clear and that others listening that can't ask this question are clear as well, we already were planning in the budget to hire a couple more folks for parks. Adding Mercer Crossing and potentially Oak Brook would require us to hire maybe another person. We're already planning on buying equipment, and trailers and such, because Parks needs that currently.
So we would have added them to existing crews to spread the workload out. This is
Okay.
a shift, so instead of having these separate crews, it would be a new crew that's added to the org chart. They would need a new truck and new trailer in this case. So in the original one, they wouldn't. So the capital cost,
Okay.
and that's why when we talked to Essex about how can we help with this, because those are costs that would be unique to this request, they came to the table and said maybe there's the potential to help with some of those capital costs we would have up front. We're already behind with fleet, so adding more of a burden to fleet is something we're very sensitive to.
So the $345,000 costs, if I'm understanding this right, if we took the two people out of there that we were going to hire anyways leaves us purely with the cost of an extra person and a truck and trailer and maybe some equipment.
Correct.
That's not 345,000. What is that number?
No, it's much lower.
Okay. I think that's the number that we need to understand so that we know what is the cost for adding Mercer Crossing and Oak Brook to the equation. It's not 345 because that's already got two people in it we were planning to hire anyways.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's the number I'd really like to understand. And from that perspective, I think it makes sense for Mercer and subsequently Oak Brook. They've been maintaining their medians, they have their own infrastructure in place, and if there are startup costs, I certainly think it's reasonable for them to participate in the transition costs over to the city at whatever level that the council agrees to. And just for the record, I did receive a couple of emails, I think it was 3, from residents in Mercer Crossing that were asking for support. So just to mention that. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Baird?
Do you know the size of the medians? Square footage, acreage?
We did look at acreage. I want to say we were, an acreage just that was like a little over 5 acres total for just Mercer. So they're pretty large medians, so
They're pretty large what?
medians.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when you look at just total acreage, it's about I think it was like 5.1 acres
Okay.
for all the west, for the Whittington Place and then for the Mercer.
Okay. So let me ask on both of these, here and in Oak Brook, who owns the street? The city?
City owns the street, yes, sir.
And does the city own the median property?
Well, I believe we do own it. It's not designated on any plat or anything that says that that's owned by the HOA. I do know, I know we're skirting, looking between Oak Brook and Mercer, but looking at Oak Brook, I know that there is some documentation that could say that that stipulates it's a private. Some of those medians could be private, but it's still on a public street, as Ben was pointing out earlier. Mercer is on a public street, and they're maintained by the HOA because of the development agreements that were in place. So that's kind of why that it started that way.
But nobody knows whether the actual property is owned by the city or the,
It's not designated on a plat, and that's typically when you would say, they identify common areas and like the amenity center. If you pulled up the plat for Mercer, the various plats, there's quite a few because there's different phases that have come in. And typically, you would have, if it's a common area, an area that they would take care of, it's designated on that. When we did the research, we looked, there's nothing on the plats that identify the medians as owned by the HOA or
So
maintained by the
it's within the right of way, city's right of way, then it's our property unless it's carved out as an HOA lot, in which case it would be theirs.
okay. Why are we not outsourcing? Do we have a lot of the parks are outsourced as far as maintenance?
Well, I'm funny you said that. We're working right now. We do currently have some park areas that we have that are mowed. We still do a lot of the other types of maintenance in-house. So, and we're actually got another, we just took bids for updating that contract. That'd be something we'd be getting to council at the next meeting is what we're planning on. But yes, we do outsource mowing park areas. And this would be a potential one we could outsource some of it. We would still do, like I said, the applications, the irrigation, the landscape detail stuff items would stay within in-house, but the mowing itself, we could contract some of that out, and we do that currently.
Okay. All right, thank
Okay. So Mark was just saying that let's just to do mowing, though, right?
No, that's everything. That's the total for the full year.
Okay.
So we're a little higher
but
Yeah, come on,
Excuse
Steve. Yeah.
when we did this, we came out and looked at multiple different ways to do this. To have, just for, say, Whittington Road, for a contractor to do that whole road, that would be $105,520. That's doing fertilizer, chemical, irrigation inspection, but not fixing anything. Then they charge you hourly rates per fixing irrigation, plus parts. So just to do Whittington and Mercer, you're looking at $226,190. That does not cover irrigation parts or the labor, just an inspection and to set controllers.
So that's for the contractor.
That's for a
Cost.
contractor to do it, for us to outsource it. For us to do it inside, he gave you those numbers there. The first year was the startup fee. Second year, drops down to 100 and something because we lose a truck, we lose a trailer, and the startup of tools and things like that. We are a little more high, but we're gonna be able to take some burden off and be able to do a lot more things with it.
That doesn't have water costs either, does it?
No, and this does not have water costs.
So, yeah, we're estimating water costs for those meetings about 20,000. So you'd have to add that to that. So,
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Bennett?
Those, I had received numbers that all of you have gotten on the medians for the rest of the city. And by my calculation, we pay $16,428 per acre. So how many acres did you say there were in?
5.1.
Okay, so $83,785, basically. But my bigger question on that is the contractor that was listed in our previous numbers for our city as it stands now at $170,000. Are we keeping that contractor, or are we replacing them with a person, with our own employee or employees at $170,000?
The new contract that they're talking about that we're bidding, or?
No, in the previous numbers I was given for the city, other than the HOAs. The contractor median mowing was $170,000. So are we keeping that contract, or are these employees that we're looking to add, is that going to be absorbed up into them? So is it a net zero, basically, is what I'm asking?
I don't believe it is at this point in time. It's going to be a net increase because they need more help with what they've been asked to do. So
Okay, so then with those numbers that you guys gave us, and you said that it was about, we'll say 30%, because you said 25 to 30%. If we took and only had that 25 to 30% of the labor in there, what would that number look like?
we can get you the information,
Okay.
but I don't want to run calculations in the middle of the meeting. Chance messing it up.
And I will say, the mowing contract, if you have the numbers that are $170,000, that was strictly for just to mow grass. That does not take care of the irrigation, that doesn't take care of any of the other things, fertilizer, chemicals.
That number was 842,000.
Excuse me? I'm sorry?
I'm looking at what I was sent. So it had city staff non-mowing maintenance at
What we got those numbers for?
$312,000, city staff chemical application at $59,000, city staff irrigation maintenance at $75,000, city water costs
Right.
for irrigation $225,000, contractor median mowing $170,000. So total, okay.
That's correct.
Councilman Ronan?
Yeah, so I do want to make sure I clear something up about the 7.5 cents. So I looked at the budget for the Mercer Crossing North, and approximately $316,750.20 has gone for median maintenance. That represents about 78.17% of the entire expense budget for the fiscal year, and that translates into about 5.86 cents additional tax that people are paying in Mercer Crossing to maintain medians that ideally should be maintained by the city. So to give you a little bit more of a actual estimation, other than assuming the entire $300 was taken out. So that's what that is. And I thank you for the presentation. I think there's been a lot of work that's gone on behind the scenes that has led us to this point. So I do want to make sure that I highlight that and share some of the things that I've learned along this journey, which sort of all started June of 2022 when I met with Essex at their office and had an opportunity to chat with them about this initiative, and that's sort of where that started. And I remember when we first had our budget discussion that fall, I had brought it up, and it wasn't successful at that point. But I realized, I said, you know what, it probably needed a little bit more work, a little bit more methodical steps leading up to that discussion than just sort of dropping it. So here's what happened afterwards. I had spoken to the HOA management group earlier this year in January as we prepared the discussion for this today, where they started to assemble research and going all the way back to 2006, where the agreements were first created to take care of the landscaping for the different medians that were involved. And I learned that the agreement was first executed back in 2007, where if you go back to the history of Mercer Crossing in general, it was originally supposed to be a commercial area, and it wasn't until 2017 that the council at that time decided that it was going to be residential. So the responsibilities that existed at that time in 2007 transitioned over to the residents, and now we have a POA/HOA that's responsible for maintaining those responsibilities of public medians. And then also wanted to highlight that we do have some representatives here from the HOA management group to help answer some questions. During our meeting, after they put all the research together, they put together a presentation, which I've shared with staff and Tina as well, that kind of address the budget and how much is being generated from residents, how much is being spent for medians and other expenses and so forth. So that was enlightening as well. And then we also had a discussion about the HOA giving some money to the city to help defer some of the first year costs. And so that number, I think is a good estimate. It likely will change because one of the things that I learned through these discussions is that depending on if this passes and makes it through the budget cycle, then we will determine when we turn it off for the HOA and turn it on for the city. And so that transition date has a lot to do with what's left in the bank accounts, because there might be contracts that need to be canceled and they come with cancellation fees. There are things that need to be paid for. There are fees that need to be collected. So there's a lot of moving pieces that contribute to the final determination as to what the final value is. So know that $120,000 number is certainly an estimate. But if I look at their financials, I see that each year they generate from collection of dues, and that's a collection of both commercial and residential properties, about $405,000 at least in this fiscal year. And Rob, would you mind going back to your to the slide that talks about the medians of the map? I think it's 3, that one. So one of the things that I also found out through the meeting with Essex was, if you look at the little green highlighted neon lines, those are the medians essentially. And you see all the residential properties on the southern part of this image. And all of those residents contribute to paying for those medians, which, they live near them, they travel on them. But what I thought was interesting was who else is contributing and who is not. The people who are contributing to this, other than the residents, are 2 commercial property owners. The first is located on the left, on the north side, that piece where the mouse is, where is Kitty Academy, as well as the Montessori School to the right. And then on the far left, there's an empty piece of land and that commercial property on the other side of Mercer Parkway. Those are the only commercial properties that actually pay towards this HOA. How much? Well, every year they generate $7,153.45. That's how much they pay for maintaining the medians across there. But then, well, wouldn't it make sense that some of the other commercial properties that we see on the northern piece with the aqua bluish roofs, wouldn't they be responsible for paying some since they get to travel and enjoy them? They don't. I thought that was interesting. The apartments all the way to the right, the canal and the brickyard, those don't contribute to that either. And Brinks Home Security, who's on the south, they don't contribute to that either. And all the way to the south of that, there are a group of 3 apartments. I think it's the Mansions, the Towers, and one other one. They also don't contribute to that, but they have the opportunity to significantly participate in the enjoyment of these medians. So there's some funky things that are going on here that just don't necessarily make sense. And part of this discussion was just trying to correct some of the imbalances that are going on. Many people don't know unless you live out there, but the residents out there have to pay for HOA North, HOA West. They have a PID assessment, and then they have a Valwood assessment. And then if you live in a townhome, you have another HOA assessment that you have to make on top of that. So there's a significant amount of expenses that exist out there. And the question is, for me, as somebody who was elected there, when I hear people say they're tired of seeing all of these expenses, is there an opportunity to try and correct some of the imbalances? And I think this is one of those opportunities. And so, let's see. And so that sort of led to the next step, which is where I had a meeting with the residents, and we had 2 council representatives there just to gather feedback and make sure that is what I heard when I was campaigning and knocking on doors and talking to people out there still the same today. And from the residents that attended, nobody was in opposition to the city taking over these medians because of the ability to relieve some of the expenses out there. So there was that meeting that was held as well, and I was able to share and educate people on the medians, the issue, what they're paying for, and answer any of the questions that they had, which I think was a lot of people were surprised, as I was to learn some of the things that have been going on out there. And then we ended up having a meeting with our Public Works and our Parks and Rec team, along with our city management, our 2 representatives for that area, and the HOA management group, which also included the vice president of the HOA management group, to make sure that we as as the staff and in preparation for this meeting understood any deferred maintenance, any issues that are of top concern for residents, any issues that are of top concern for the HOA management group who's responsible for addressing those issues, the cost that it takes, and any other logistical issues or just any other logistical items that needed to be discussed in preparation for this meeting. So there's been a lot of work that's been going on from council representatives, from the HOA management group, city management, as well as Public Works and Parks and Rec Department, all leading to this discussion. And so I wanted to make sure that I went through that because unlike the first time I tried this, I've learned sort of the best way to try and give the residents a chance for this to move forward. So that's why it was important for these steps to take place and for me to highlight them and make sure that everybody here in this room has a great deal of confidence in knowing that we have a really good understanding of what the issues are, what needs to be addressed, which then turns to what the cost is going to be. And so, let's see, what else? And then I think that's it from there, unless anybody has any other questions from there, but I'm good for now.
I have a couple of questions, but I'd also like to make a comment, hopefully without hurting anybody's feeling. Anybody that might be in the room. It's not like these were hidden costs when people bought homes in the area. They knew that there was an HOA. They knew what the HOA dues were. Okay? So I'm not going to go back and belabor that. But I am curious, because I think moving in this direction opens a door that is going to lead to other requests across the city. And if I look at your Pathways Forward sheet or slide, one of the most important phrases on there is per city standards and on bullet point number 1. That needs to be defined. And that per city standards is defined by the city council, not by the residents. And there could be a huge disconnect there. So I think that needs to be vetted out as we move forward. The third bullet point I don't see as being a workable solution because the city takes over medians and maintains them to HOA standards. Again, we don't maintain medians currently to HOA standards. We maintain medians to city standards throughout the city. So that needs to be addressed moving forward. I am assuming from my research that medians are privately owned as they are in the Oak Brook neighborhood. And so will these medians be deeded to the city? Because if they're not, then we run the risk of possible liability to the city for maintaining private property, something that we do not own. And if we break something, then who's going to be responsible for repairing anything that might be broken? So there's a liability factor there that needs to be addressed. I also think that this sets a precedent for other HOAs to request maintenance from the city for medians that are on their publicly accessible streets. And I can name you one neighborhood in particular, Valley View Park Estates, which has not only a median at the entryway, but then 2 traffic circles. There are other neighborhoods where there are traffic circles or other areas of landscape that aren't necessarily taken care of by the city that could very well become items that need to be taken care of by the city. So we need to be prepared to address all of this as this comes forward. So I would want to try to inventory that to be prepared for what is the onslaught that might possibly come from this. You mentioned about $200,000 for water. Was that correct? Did I hear that correct?
20,
20.
Okay, maybe it was a misspeak at the end there.
I believe it was when.
Okay, all right.
Went
I just
down my
wanted, I
list.
wanted to double check
The
that.
actual medians, the medians were already taken care of for the whole year.
Okay. So as it presently stands, though, let's just put a pause on taking care of medians in any neighborhood. We don't have an absolute need for another vehicle trailer. You had an absolute need, or what I'm hearing was a need for 2 additional bodies in order to help maintain the quality of care that we provide on the rest of the
correct.
things that we provide the city. Okay, big difference. Now, if we're going to take on these other areas, then that's where I'm seeing this necessitates a vehicle, a trailer, and an additional body, which would make that 3-person crew.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So in the back of my mind, I was just wondering, since Essex is spending all this money to maintain and they're willing to pitch in, well, what if they bought the vehicle and trailer and donated it to the city? And then that's some participation in the startup, just throwing an idea out there. So I guess my overriding question in the back of my mind is, where does this go in the future? And are we looking to a situation that is going to create us an issue where we're having to take care of more areas in the city than what we're currently looking at right here with A, Mercer, and B, Oak Brook? I'm not saying, I've never said that I'm against this. I'm just trying to raise questions that I don't think have been fully vetted yet. And like Councilman Jackson said, the actual cost of servicing this area and/or the Oak Brook area, let's say the vehicle and trailer is a non-starter. We're going to have that at some point in time anyway. Let's leave that out. But the additional responsibility of running crew out there, that whatever that hard cost is, and determining what is city standards, and is that acceptable to Mercer residents? Would that be acceptable to Oak Brook residents? Because the last thing I want to do is start doing something and then having people come back and asking for something else, or you said you were going to do this, or it doesn't look good, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're not your personal lawn crew. City standard is different from the way I mow my yard. So we just need to establish what that is. And again, one of the things that was mentioned is when landscaping dies. Okay, well, we do have reasonable responsibility to replace landscaping, but we also have medians that run through Brookhaven, medians on Webb Chapel, Josie, Spring Valley, Marsh, Midway, that need attention also, which are the main gateways to our city. So I don't want anybody to think that they're going to get slighted if we take on additional responsibilities, but we certainly need to plan and budget for that. And I think as we move forward in this discussion, those concerns would be the same whether we're talking about Mercer, whether we're talking about Oak Brook, whether we're talking about Valley View Park Estates, whether we're talking about Lake Point Circle, any of the places where we have shared aesthetics, I'll say, because maybe it doesn't have to be a meeting, it could be a circle or something else in a street.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that reasonable?
So I do have some comments. So I don't think anybody here mentioned or questions whether people knew or didn't know that when they were moving in that they were going to be responsible for a large subset of expenses that the rest of the city wasn't going to be responsible for. I don't think that's the question.
Okay.
I think the question is a morality thing. So I'll ask you, do you believe that everyone should be treated equally?
Yes, I believe everybody should be treated equally, but there are homes in certain areas that are not treated equally because, or they elected to build neighborhoods to a certain standard, and those people who moved in those neighborhoods accepted that. I'm one of them. I live in an HOA right now. And so while I have common area and medians, I expect, just as a resident, let me take my mayor hat off, as Terry Lynn resident, I expect the medians in my neighborhood to be maintained to a higher standard than what the city provides, because I'm directly paying an additional charge for that. That may or may not be the case when you look at our median, but what is next? Are we going to be asked to take over common areas? I'm
Well, and what I'm hearing is, yes, you do believe that
Yes.
people should be treated equally. So I think that goes in hand with what you've said earlier also, which is precedent. And if we combine that your belief is that people should be treated equally, and what is the precedent? Well, the precedent of treating people equally has been that throughout the city, the norm is that the city maintains medians. If we go down Valwood and go all the way down Brookhaven until we hit Addison, those medians are all maintained by the city. If we go down Valley View, well, the map's not up there, but if we go all the way down Valley View, the medians there are all maintained by the city. And any other median that's publicly accessible is a fundamental basic service that is provided to residents.
Yes.
And so the precedent has been set that the city is responsible for medians in publicly accessible areas that are enjoyed by many, all. And so I think that's the precedent there.
Well, and to their point, that's why I mentioned like Valley View Park Estates, publicly accessible. There's no gate. Now, if this was the Vineyards, for example, which is at Valley View and Marsh on the southwest corner, that has a gate, that's a private street, private neighborhood. They're responsible for everything on their own.
And I'm not familiar with those areas. I don't know who the council member for that area is. I don't know if those areas are on public streets, if they're on private streets. I don't
They
know.
have a gate. They have a gate, so you can't get in.
The former ones that you had mentioned.
But
So I don't know anything about those to be able to speak to them. But what we're here to talk about is two medians where council members have identified that they are on publicly accessible areas.
I get that. I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that this is going to open a larger discussion because now I would challenge everybody to go back and look at the neighborhoods within their district and see, I think there's 9 or 11 HOAs in Farmers Branch, somewhere in that area. Who's taking care of what? And is an HOA taking care of something that's on a public street? If they are, then maybe that needs to be revisited.
And I think someone asked that question earlier, if that was the case. And
The
I
question's been asked.
Yes,
I've asked that,
yeah.
and I believe you've asked that question
And I
as
think the
well.
answer is no.
And the answer
that's not-
we've heard is.
Not true. I'm telling you from my own neighborhood. Public street. The neighborhood itself is taking care of the medians. So that's not fair if we do this for two other areas, then we need to be willing to study this deeper to see, okay, is there more involved?
Well, I think that's up to the council member in that area to, if that is a concern of those residents, that is up to that specific council member to say, as the representative, we need to bring this for a discussion and it's treated on a case-by-case basis.
I think one thing that we're overlooking a little bit here, and I understand what you're trying to say about precedents. I have a similar concern. That's why I was asking about what other public streets with medians in neighborhoods is the city taking care of, Brookhaven Country Club being one of them, but they don't have an HOA. I think that's a big difference here, is whether you have an HOA or you don't. But one of the precedences I think that we need to consider in this discussion is there was an agreement made between the city and Oak Brook and the city and Mercer Crossing with the developers to say, you're building streets that will be public streets, but you're going to be responsible for those medians. And they said okay, and the city said okay at that time, and that's been the agreement. And now today, we're looking at, okay, but that's not the way Valwood's treated, or Valley View, or Marsh Lane. Those are public streets. they have medians, but they don't have an HOA. So there's a difference there. So I understand what you're saying. We need to be paying attention to precedents here because there are other neighborhoods that might want to come online. Your neighborhood specifically, Valley View Park Estates, which is in my district. Vineyards is in my district. Vineyards has a gate. You cannot get in there. That to me is a private street.
Correct.
Even though Oak Brook doesn't have gates, they have private streets. So maybe some of the ambiguity is between what is a private street and a public street. Is it a private street if there's public access?
Oak Brook Parkway is not a private street. It's a
No,
side
Oak Brook
street.
Parkway's not, but the streets that go into the neighborhoods.
Those- But we're
are.
talking about the medians for Oak Brook when we
Understood.
get there.
Again,
are back on the
being
book.
But if
specific.
if we make this decision, if, let's say, Valley View Park Estates said, well, we have a traffic circle down here at the bottom of, what is that street at the bottom of your neighborhood? It's got that little circle.
Acres.
Glad Acres, right? That should be handled by the city because this is a public street that goes completely around it. The city should be maintaining the traffic circle. Does that give then another neighborhood with a similar situation the right and the precedence to say, well, we have one too?
Sorry, my stomach growling. So I just want to flush this out so we don't have a bunch of people coming up after the fact, after, whatever's decided here, Oak Brook, whichever way. If the city decides to move forward, if the council decides to move forward and take on the responsibility, that's fine, okay? But then we don't want other people coming, hey, what about us? Okay? You excluded us. So I'm just saying we need to look at maybe the bigger picture here because there may be some other neighborhoods that share in this same thought. Still our decision. Your decision. Okay.
We can have parks check for any other, because there's been a lot of discussion about easements and maintenance that we've had in the last year of discovery of things that were maintained that were private property that the city shouldn't be maintaining, and we've reset those. If you want me to have parks go through and check again and double check the work that's been done in the past to see if there's any other concerns, but at this point in time, the city's received 2 requests for consideration, and that's what's being brought before at this time. We did wrap it in the caveat that it was a public street with a median in the middle that has an HOA or another group maintaining it. There's been some questions about some of these costs, so I had the team pull some numbers together real quick. The truck and trailer is $63,000, but it'll be plus equipment. Now, again, the market can move a little bit. It tends to move on us, but today that's what would be comfortable saying would go in the budget would be $63,000 for a truck and a trailer, plus the equipment, depending on what Park says the equipment needs are. So that does help with understand the number for some of the startup cost. The other part is personnel. If you look at a 3-person crew, all in with benefits, it's gonna be 180 to 200. Again, benefit elections are different. I need to see what the job offers go out at. The market's always moving on that one, depending on the person, how they're hired, what they're hired in at. Those seem to be hourly positions, so there could be some overtime in there as well. But again, that'd be a crew leader, a team leader, and then 2 of the maintenance workers as well. So all in on that one. There's a lot of ways to slice the pie, but it's basically whittling away at that 235.3 number that we had sitting originally that y'all were looking at and considering. So you start adding in the truck and take that out. Now, there's gonna be some chemicals they need to buy every year. There's cost associated with that. There's gonna be water, there's gonna be the irrigation parts. But it lines up really nice with the numbers that have been presented from the parks team saying this is our estimate for it. So what staff's looking for on this one is, this is all part of the budget process. There's no decision being made today. The decision will be made with the budget. But they did a high-level approach to this because we haven't had direction from council yet. So we're looking from direction, do we want us to move forward with this in the budget that you'll ultimately review multiple times and consider then adopt in September? Or is this, and you could argue that Oak Brook's basically the same discussion at this point in time. The numbers are a little bit different. So instead of Rob doing a separate presentation on that one, there's the numbers are there. Is this comfortable for council to staff to start adding this into the budget process for you all to ultimately vote on with the budget? Or not? Because that's kind of where we have to go with staff is we would put it in the budget. It wouldn't be done outside of the budget process and go from there.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say, from what I've heard, these seem to be reasonable numbers. They're not exorbitant. And so I would think that including this in the budget for discussion purposes at this time should be easy enough to do. Now, I also want to say, I know we have members from some of the neighborhoods here. The study session is not where citizens can comment, but if you wish to comment on this, you can certainly come to the council meeting and speak during citizen comment for that information, for your comments to be heard on this topic at that time. So I just want to make sure I'm not ignoring anybody. Okay, just being fair about this. Your thoughts on?
I'm obviously passionate about getting this into the budget discussion. So therefore, I understand and had been thoughtful of the concern of other areas. And I had believed, with the exception of Mercer, that we had addressed most, if not all of them. There may be an outlier, as we've learned at the table tonight. However, I'm comfortable with this going forward into the budget discussion and would look to see that the Parks team puts their budget estimate in order to absorb this. I think there are some questions about the legality of signing over deeds and what have you, and I'll defer to our attorneys to make sure that we have all of that, buttoned up accordingly, and for the long term. But those are and I'm wrapping both Mercer and Oak Brook, obviously, into this discussion at the moment.
Richard? I'm supportive of having the consistency of the median care across the city, including in those areas where there are HOAs. I would propose for my council counterparts to consider that in the cost of taking over these medians, that the HOAs pay 75% of that startup cost to ensure that the infrastructure and this, whatever else is included in that is brought into city standard, and that we maintain it according to city standard, not HOA standard, that we were consistently applying our median care across the city. The other thing that I would ask also, and this relates to, Mayor, your concerns with what if other neighborhoods come up and say, well, we want this, we want that, is I'd like to see staff put together a very clear guideline of where the city's responsibility ends. For example, Valley View Park Estates, I would suggest the city's responsibility ends at the entrance. The city wouldn't take over any kind of responsibility, even though that main street, Glad Acres, is a public street. There is a very nice median there that's maintained and paid for by those homeowners. That's not a thoroughfare. It's not a similar type of median as what you have right there on Valley View Lane or out on Whittington or some of the other streets. Same thing with Vineyard. Stops at the gate, right? Doesn't include the brick wall around the outside and the landscaping and the trees like what's around Valley View Park Estates. Cambridge Crossing stops at Alpha, the entrance into those neighborhoods. All the surrounding property, medians within those residential neighborhoods are considered HOA and not public streets, if you will. Like your street's a public street, is it not? It is, right? So I think we need to make sure we're very clear on what's public, what's private but publicly accessible, so that we have that guideline going forward just to ensure clarity for any future
Absolutely.
inquiries.
So what we would do in this case, if council gives direction to consider pursuing this, we would ask both HOAs to equally bear the burden of the startup costs together if possible, because it wouldn't be fair to shift it. We have to add the truck and the trailer and the equipment, correct? So
That kind of
council-
stuff, correct, but I would suggest there's less acreage in Oak Brook that needs to be addressed than there is in Mercer, so it doesn't seem fair for them to split that down the middle, if that's what you're saying.
Either way, I'd need the truck and the trailer. So to me, it's a
Agreed.
sunk cost, and we can hammer out those details, but we'd also go after any deferred maintenance as well. What we don't want to do is inherit a median that's
Right.
got a lot of sunk work that needs to be done. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done way before any of this moves forward, which would, again, come back wrapped to the council with the final proposal inside of the budget. But we would then begin those discussions on a more serious level. This is study session, high level, here's what it kind of looks like. We're going to discover new things as we dive in, but it's also that balance of how much staff time did we put in at the forefront when we don't have direction. So if council says, go ahead and dive in a little bit deeper, we'll start those deeper dives and have those discussions, engage with the HOAs, work with the attorneys to figure out how this handoff's going to work. Clearly define the median's ownership. That's, we own it, they own it. Most likely it reverts to us if it doesn't already belong with us, but we'll start diving into the deeds and the plating and everything else to make sure we understand all the nuances of that arrangement. But we'll have the staffing numbers because we'll start putting those together. We'll understand how much the staff will actually cost to the penny versus where the assumptions are right now. There's a lot of assumptions built into this. And if it was above above the city standard, if there's a way for the city to work that into an agreement, that's different, but we wouldn't maintain the property separately to different standards. We have a city standard that council adopts and you all give us, but if there's a higher standard that's wanted, we can work, there's ways to work through that and we can work with the attorneys on that as well. If they want to, there's a delta, there's a price there. If we can do it and there's a legal way to do it, we can entertain those conversations as well. But that way it's not, these homes get this type of median, these homes don't. It's these homes all get the baseline. But if there's
Right.
the capacity and the ability and the funding available to go to a different level, again, that's a contract that will come to council for you all to consider ultimately and say, this is something we're comfortable with. But that's how we would approach it as well, as long as it's no free riding on this
I
one.
think that's fine.
That's how we would
I think it's
approach all of it to make sure it's balanced for everyone. So they can't just say, well, this is a different median. No, sometimes they're different just because of where they're located,
Right.
because of the just limits of how big the median is. Some have pavers, some don't. Some have trees, some don't. Some have monuments, some don't. But that would be that. And then also we would take one monument over in Mercer because there is one in a median.
In a
So that
median.
would be part of it. It's, I forgot the street, you probably know it by memory, but there is one piece of artwork monument that's sitting in a median. So
Mercer Parkway and Luna.
so we wouldn't separate that out. We would absorb that as well as part of this because it's really hard to say, well, we're not touching that. It's in the median. So
Sure.
we would take care
Yeah.
of it.
Okay, thank you.
So I hope that addresses some of the questions and kind of shows how staff would align for this one as well. And then if anybody else came forward, it's part of the budget process. That would be a future budget discussion. It wouldn't require us to do that. It would just be a future consideration at council.
Thank you, Mayor.
So for clarity, is this something we would vote on in the end? Or are we just, or is it just going to be in the next budget?
I can do either or. Usually it would be put into the budget because there's a lot of interconnected pieces that are hard to separate out because the equipment's going to go in one line item. The staff are going to be in the parks budget. Chemicals will be in there as well. And then if there's any transfers coming from the HOAs, that's going to be in a revenue side of it with a separate. So there's a lot of pieces. Typically, I would put this in the budget and we can discuss it as part of the budget process separately like we do with the other budget elements. But it would start folding into the budget process because it touches several elements of the
There would be related contracts also.
Yes. So there's a lot of pieces to it that all need to kind of go hand in hand. Very public, very open, very transparent.
Yeah, I'm fine continuing, would like to see more details as the research is done.
Okay.
I would tend to want to vote on it, though, since it's such a big change and it's, we're taking tax money that the whole city pays and taking care of one specific thing, so. But that would be, I guess we'd have to vote on whether to vote on it or something.
We will have lots of budget discussion. I think you'll have ample
Sure.
time to address that. Okay,
That's it.
Councilwoman?
I agree with Martin.
Okay. Councilman?
I am supportive of it.
Okay.
So direction of staff is to move forward. I feel like Oak Brook's a very similar conversation unless y'all would like him to go through that one. If you're comfortable, I'd like to respect Rob's time and your time because we're,
Put them together.
No,
Okay.
we're good.
thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
May I make one differential? We touched on it. We talked that Mercer is 5 acres. Can we at least throw the number out that Oak Brook is significantly smaller?
I could, if you want to, I can just show you at least just the picture so you can kind of get a frame of
Yes.
reference.
That'd be fine. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, so the meetings we're talking about at Oak Brook, and that's actually the meeting coming off Webb Chapel. The ones we're talking about, if this is Webb Chapel, it's the first 3 large medians up to Gatwick are what we're talking about. So everything east of Gatwick are medians we're already taking care of. The
Correct.
city's already taken, and then actually I learned there are a few little small circle medians in Gatwick that we're already taking care of as well, and we take care of Ken Reimer Park at the end of, if you
So
keep
what
going
you-
east on Oak Brook.
What's your guess? Like that's 1/30th the size, maybe?
I mean, you can see, here's the median we're talking about, the first one, that's this one right here.
Are they about the same width as Mercer?
Yeah, this is the widest one, isn't it?
Most of the medians throughout the city are about 13 to 15 foot, and I believe out at Mercer, they're probably more like 20,
Yeah, they're big.
Whoa,
maybe just a
So-
little over.
Yeah.
so I bet it is like a 30th.
It's very small.
Yes.
in comparison. And so that's all. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Guys.
All right. Thank you. Moving on. Next up will be A4, discuss the Oak Brook Neighborhood Community HOA street signage request and provide direction to city staff.
I thought we had another one before that.
We
The
just
HOA.
combined it.
They rolled,
Oh,
they
Same
rolled
thing.
Oak Brook in.
oh, well, I had some questions about that one.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Hold on.
Let me grab them real fast.
All right. We'll go, where'd he go?
They pulled
She's
out for a
grabbing them.
second. They're probably taking their notes and putting them together real quick. We're pulling them back.
Okay.
Rob, I spoke too soon. My apologies. There's some questions on Oak Brook.
So let me just announce, so now we'll move on to A3, discuss maintenance of medians within the Oak Brook neighborhood area and provide direction to staff. Councilman Rom.
Are you going to go through the presentation?
I can, yes. Sorry. Let me back up real quick. Okay, we'll talk about Oak Brook. Just, we did see some pictures just briefly. So the areas we're talking about are the first three medians on Oak Brook from Webb Chapel to Gatwick. These medians are currently maintained by the Oak Brook HOA. The Oak Brook HOA residents pay for the median maintenance as part of their HOA assessments. HOA residents have worked with previous city councils and staff since the development was constructed. And actually, I saw a date early 70s, so this 1980s might be a little too early for that, on possible shared responsibility of HOA-owned medians in the development. So that we just touched on this, so we're looking at the first big three medians. This is actually the first one that comes off of Webb Chapel. So just looking at some of the numbers similar to Mercer, we estimated some costs on, we do have to create, tie into the city's water to be able to irrigate the three medians. So there is some costs associated with that. We'll have to do some boring and also look at the current irrigation system, which we do have Colleen here with the HOA, and I did have a discussion with her. And from what I understand, the system is operational. Of course, our staff hasn't looked at it yet. And as Ben touched on earlier, we want to make sure everything's is operational and functioning. So the primary cost of this 45 is the boring under the streets and putting in the new tap. And I did also confirm with Public Works, I talked to Ryan Sarter, Public Works Director, that, they are looking at some, a meter project for this development. The meters for irrigation would be separate. They're not included as part of that. So just kind of wanted to clarify that. So other than that startup cost, as we alluded to earlier, there's no need for truck and trailer. This would be just the annual cost for staffing. And like I said, this is, we're already maintaining quite a bit in this area already. So we could definitely, this was kind of a good budget number, but we can define this even a little bit more now that we've got some direction from council. And like I said, we would maintain it to current city standard. And as you can see, there wasn't a lot in those medians. I think they've just got trees, mainly in turf. And then remaining medians along, just to touch on that, I did earlier that we take care of everything east of the medians we're talking about. The park that's at the end of, it's at Garden Brook and Oak Brook. And then I believe that the median maintenance was part of the original development agreement. at least these 3 medians, and I think the other items within, near the townhomes. So this one's pretty short. If there's any questions on these.
So you had said that you're already maintaining some of the areas, and that's how you were able to arrive at the cost estimates.
Correct.
When you say some of the areas, what does that mean?
So if we look at the.
Is that like in the medians, or is that just,
No, so this just shows the first 3 medians. There are medians that go all the way
I
down
see.
Oak Brook to the east to Kenreimer Park. And so we currently maintain those. There's also some medians along Gatwick. They're actually small circles, kind of driveway circles. We maintain those as well. So if you look at all the medians on Oak Brook, we're already maintaining the areas on Gatwick and Kenreimer Park, which is a pretty large park. There's quite a bit we're doing out there already.
okay. And has our city staff met with the HOA management company in a similar way to the Mercer Crossing medians?
We've had conversations with Colleen Rulian, and then also we did contact the HOA president. Her name's Sarah. I don't remember Sarah's last name. Yes. Yes, Sarah Lewis. And so we contacted her. She wasn't able to make it to the meeting today. She's traveling. So Colleen, she emailed us that Colleen could speak for the HOA if we had any questions specific to them.
Okay. And does Colleen work for the HOA management company, or do they have one?
As far as I know, I'm not sure. Do you?
They have,
Okay.
they have a management
Let
company.
her-
Colleen doesn't work for them. She's a resident. She's a resident.
I think you can.
Please allow her to answer the question, Mayor, if I may.
Just say your name and address for the record since you're speaking.
Colleen Rowleen, 3223 Whispering Oak,
Who's the management company that you guys use?
Advanced Management Services. Deetra was contacted by someone named Jennifer to come speak to the street signs. And because she is ill today, she asked me if I could take those questions.
Okay. So the answer to my question is no, you've not met with somebody from the HOA management company? Okay.
No.
How did you determine, I guess, logistically, what was the best path forward, keeping in mind that the HOA management companies probably, like in our HOA, the HOA management company is the one who usually has the attorneys and the funds to use for different resources to bring in, to have discussions and pull research and all of those things. So how did you figure out the logistical pieces that needed to come together for this?
Well, all we did is look at what we're already maintaining now in the medians. So just from looking at how we maintain those currently, the staff it takes, the materials, that's how we determine the cost, the annual cost is put in the presentation. We didn't get any numbers from HOA management company. It was all determined from our own maintenance of that area. It's a little different than I would say Mercer because we don't maintain medians in Mercer. So we are dependent on what the HOA management company for those numbers. But this one, because we do so much in the area and we already maintain medians in that area, we have a pretty good idea of how much the costs are going to be.
And and my thing is not about the cost
Sure.
of how you arrived at the cost.
Gotcha.
It was more so of how, I'm just thinking of the meeting that we had with all of us together. We talked about
Correct.
what were the common resident concerns? Is there any deferred maintenance? Do you have any issues? Are there any potential projects coming up that require expenditures? And what is the current cost of maintaining that? What is the current HOA cost that is bared on the residents for these specific medians? Did you have a conversation with somebody about all of those facts?
No. So
Okay.
we haven't had any kind of conversations with the management company or residents in regards to
Okay.
that level of detail like we did for Mercer.
And there's nobody from the HOA management company here today? We just have you, right, today?
Yeah,
Okay.
just me.
Okay. Do we know what precipitated the fact that residents had to now manage or maintain these medians? Like what caused that? Do you know?
Part of the developer agreement. So I want to clarify, there have been meetings, and we've had both the homeowners association group as well as other meetings that had involved their management group, so they knew we were working on this. We've had city meetings where we've addressed from the legal standpoint how this had come to this particular position. And that included developer agreements that date back, and Jawaria had worked on a number of research projects in order to determine that. So this last three of the medians, as we say here, or these three medians that are in play here, are a responsibility of the HOA. And it, to the same reason you're discussed in the previous one, these are on a public street. As Robert's already talked about, we're maintaining those all the way down on Oak Brook already. And so the opportunity exists for the homeowners association to transfer these over. And we talked about the legalities earlier when we were talking about the Mercer medians, to make sure that the legal aspects of putting these into the onus of the city is what we're really discussing. And they still have maintenance requirements for landscaping on the rest of their property. It's just these three medians that they would be eliminating. So I want to be clear, Councilman Roman, that we've had a number of discussions. We've involved, this has been a long-standing, it goes back well before I was even a council member here. Mr. Baumgartner, who sat in this seat before, was a champion for many of these things and couldn't always achieve what we've at least seemingly gotten to at this particular point. So I'm hearing your concern is we may not have engaged the management group to the level you engaged the Mercer one, but I want to make it emphatically clear that they have been aware and they have been open to this particular idea for a long period of time.
And my questions are just more so pointed at making sure that we've done some sort of similar due diligence. Because if I'm in his shoes and he just said he's not had that conversation with anybody from the management group to be able to answer many of the questions that I've
Well, and
listed,
and
I want to
Robert
make sure.
Robert has taken
Can I
over.
please finish?
Yes.
And so I just want to make sure that if I'm putting myself in his shoes and I'm having to give the board a specific recommendation about here's what I believe the true cost to be, or here's what I believe what the expenditures are going to look like for the future, I want to make sure that I feel confident in his recommendation. And as it stands, I don't. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to this. What I'm saying is maybe there's an opportunity to come back and answer those questions so that when he does come back, and maybe other people don't need those questions, but for me, I'm a very factual person, and so I need all those facts to be able to arrive at a final decision. Again, not saying I'm not in support of it. I think they're in a very similar situation to the Mercer thing, but we just need to figure out what the actual cost is. And then figure out, is the cost reflective of what actually needs to be done? And I want to understand what is going to be the cost savings for those residents and several other things that I don't think we can even get into because that conversation has not happened with our staff. So that's all I'm saying.
To your point, and I would maybe put this in simpler terms. Think of these medians. This is a used car. We're buying a used car from somebody. So we don't know what the hidden defects are, and we need to make sure that before we take them on, they're brought up to city standard. Same thing for Oak Brook also, that we're not getting ourselves into any surprises.
Right, but with Mercer, we know how much they pay
We know how much you're
specifically
paying.
to go for the median.
And we know.
It's a
And
different
we-
model. I'm sorry, it's a different model in Mercer as compared to Oak Brook.
Yep.
So just
Can we
want,
get those numbers or from the model that they have?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that shouldn't be hard. But again, they're both used cars, so we need to make sure that we're
Absolutely.
getting a good quality vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, and that was
That's it.
that was the major concern
Yeah.
I had with even my median. I mean, my medians are much larger, and so I wanted to make sure that everybody was at the table. So that's why we even brought in Public Works on top of our
Absolutely.
team, because I was like, we need to make sure that nothing comes out a year later and we're sitting here having the discussion where, hey, we didn't know there was this massive issue here. And so that's why I've spent so much time with the HOA management group as well as with staff to make sure that the research was done. I didn't want to come here without that being done. And while I appreciate, we do have some representatives here, if I'm comparing it to other HOA groups, it's like how we sit on council, it's a volunteer thing. It's not our professional job to run HOAs. It's not our full-time thing. And so I really would like to have the stamp of approval from the HOA management company saying, these are the issues that we know exist, and having that conversation with our team. That would feel comfortable for me.
Yeah, but I hear what you're asking for, but I also take a little bit of umbrage to the fact that we haven't done due diligence. And if I may, Ben, could I ask you to opine that we've had numerous meetings with city staff on this particular topic, and this is not being done by the seat of our pants. And you didn't say that, but I want you to understand that there's been due diligence.
There has been
going
a
on.
lot of work gone into this from the HOA standpoint. I know Councilman Merritt has been involved in a lot of those discussions. So, but again, that information wasn't shared. We don't have the historical on what they've been spending maintenance-wise, et cetera, et cetera. So we just want to make sure the same homework that we would do on Mercer should be done on Oak Brook.
To answer directly on the questions, the level of questions such as what is their cost has not been addressed at this time, but at the will of council, we'll make sure you have equal information. Now, assuming that they'll work with us on it, which I'm assuming they will.
Their costs are over $400, and it blends in water and maintenance and other street repair fees. So we have that detail. We can get that. But I take great umbrage at the fact we haven't done, the implication we haven't done due diligence, and I dislike that.
Is it going to save them money by
Yes.
us doing this? That's,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes, and it's fair
Yeah.
to ask what that number is.
Yeah.
But it also is coupled with addressing their water needs and other things as well. And so, again, I don't have that detail, just have them save X number of dollars. A fair ask, but I just want to be clear that we've been doing a lot of work in this.
There's been lots of meetings to discuss things such as water medians, street signs, water meters are not water medians. Medians, water meters, street signs, streets, basically the whole gamut of city services. So it's been a very broad discussion.
Correct.
And that's where this will trigger a threshold for us to gather more information. Again, y'all will have ultimate say-so and final approval, but we'll gather any information that's needed as well. It's just getting what information is council looking for, and we'll make sure we can gather that as well for you also. What would the savings be to the residents in Oak Brook? I believe is a good question, and we can get that information.
I'm not debating that being a fair question.
But it's just waiting for direction from council to direct staff to put that time and resources in. But there have been lots of meetings with Oak Brook on a variety of different topics.
Yeah, I mean, and I think for me, again, I'm not saying this is an absolute no. If anything, I'm probably really, really in favor of this, but I want to make sure that all of the due diligence has been done. Not saying no due diligence has been done. I just want to make sure that the due diligence that I would normally require of myself, I would require from a similar project. And I'm just trying to hold myself to the same standard that I would expect from anybody else bringing a similar project. And that's all I'm saying. So for me, I would like to see that. And then I'd feel comfortable with saying, absolutely, yes, let's do this. But that's just me. I mean, other people could have a differing opinion, and mine is irrelevant.
I think that's very reasonable. I think we're all sort of on the same page here, and that's why I skipped over, I didn't skip over, I thought we were combining 3 and 4 as the same discussion for both. But anyway, sorry about that.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay. Are we good on Oak Brook discussion for, as far as this maintenance?
Basically, treated the same way, move forward with the
Yes.
discussion, catch it up to the level of discussion the Mercer discussion has already achieved, and then move forward with council direction to start building from there.
Yes.
Only the clarification is understanding the savings to the Oak Brook residents.
Savings than any deferred maintenance. So we would like to
Correct.
talk to the
Correct.
the management company
Fair.
and kind of
As long
understand.
as we're specifying what the difference is.
Yes, so any concerns, any deferred maintenance, any resident concerns, that was something that we're always careful of, is what are the resident concerns? And we can get all those questions. We'll set up the meetings.
Okay.
Rob will take care of
You
it.
good?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, A4, discuss the Oak Brook Neighborhood Community HOA street signage request and provide direction to city staff.
She's got them all pulled up right here.
We should have just written a check for this and paid for it ourselves.
I know.
Mayor and Council, Jennifer Rainey, Assistant to the City Manager.
Yes.
Much of this background is what Rob's already gone through, so I won't belabor much of it. Since 1982, there's been quite a few discussions on different topics: median maintenance, water metering, street reconstruction, drainage maintenance, and street signage. We have in the past provided one-time funding utilizing an economic development incentive agreement for repairs of street infrastructure. On February 5th of this year, Councilmember Merritt shared a letter provided by a resident of Oak Brook HOA and Oak Brook HOA's property manager, that was Deetra, requesting replacement of signage at Whispering Oak. Oak Brook HOA's property manager has requested the city consider replacing signage throughout Oak Brook since then, as existing signs are not uniform. The photos showing some different signage, not so uniform. Some of them have electricity, such as Golden Oak and Oak Brook, that has the two signs or the two lights on top. Whispering Oak on the far left, this is one of the kind of T intersections, so it's got arrows pointing different ways, and it also has electrical, you can see on the bottom, and then the light on the top. And then various signs throughout. Some of those on the right side over here, Water Oak and Oak Brook have our city sign blades and the pole. And then this last one over here has our city sign blades at Silent Oak and Oak Brook, where it's near electrical and light. So there was an existing Oak Brook HOA light and sign, and then we've just installed our signs nearby. So you can see there's a little bit of varied signage within Oak Brook. And as referenced in that map, there are varied signage. That's why you've got a couple of different colors. These green dots over here on the right side, those are city-provided signs, sign blades, so those logoed sign blades, and then also city-provided sign post. This yellow dot down here in the bottom left, that yellow dot is city sign blades, but not a uniform street pole. So the street pole is made of a different material, and it's not to the height that we would prefer ours to. These red dots represent Oak Brook HOA-owned street poles and sign blades. And the little red light bulbs represent signs that have electricity provided to those existing signs. And then those blue triangles represent Oak Brook HOA signs with those arrows left and right on internal and private streets. So those are those T intersections that are just purely private streets intersecting each other. So an economic development incentive agreement provided by Article 52A allows us to do a Chapter 380 agreement on these. These two T intersections, I'm going to skip back to that map for you. Those two T intersections are both private road intersections with arrow signs to the addresses to the left and the right, and those are not included in our cost estimate below. The four intersections that intersect with Oak Brook Parkway are included in our cost estimate. And then one location that has electrical and lighting installed, I've got that with an asterisk. We would recommend placing signs nearby, similar to that of Silent Oak and Oak Brook, without removing that HOA provided post with the light and the sign existing. So that total cost for all of those is $709.60. The reason that Silent Oak and Oak Brook Parkway is less is because it already has those branded name blades, those red street signs with our brand on it. It just needs that updated pole or that updated post so that it reflects our uniform height across. And I'll go back to this map because it's probably best to discuss it looking at the map than to look at the screen that says discussion for you.
I would just ask the city manager, can you find $709 in the budget to pay for this?
Oh, no, that's easy. The reason this is before council is because it's still public funds going to what is private property.
Understand.
And so it's just making sure y'all are comfortable with that redirection of funds. We could easily do this, but when it's something that's, again, public to private, I'm always going to bring it to you all and make sure you're comfortable with this. The attorney can make it work legally. It's a small dollar amount, but I'm always careful
Thank
to,
you.
no pressure, Pete. But I always want to be transparent and open on this when we're moving money in this direction, because it is moving from public to private, which is a line I don't cross on my own. So I just want to make sure you all have the opportunity to discuss it. If you have any questions or concerns, again, it's only the street signs off of public street. Now, it intersects with private streets. We're not going into Oak Brook and their private streets. Those are the directional signs. Those are not included because it's private street on private street. So I'm still using my criteria here as it's an intersection with a public roadway with Oak Brook Parkway. So that's the delineation that I'm using. But again, small dollar amount, council.
Are
I
we-
want to make sure y'all had the opportunity to discuss it as a group. Easy enough for us to do if y'all are comfortable with it.
Are we relighting the two signs that have lights? No? Okay.
No,
We would
we'll
just put
post
our
our
sign
signs
next to
nearby.
it.
Jennifer, could you be so kind to put a little bit of backstory on why the 4 signs in green to the east of the property are meet the
Yes, I believe those were done through previous reconstruction.
correct?
I don't have all of the backstory, so I don't want to speak out of turn on
No,
that.
but you're
previous
correct.
reconstruction.
They were redone when the city reworked those streets. So therefore, there's some consistency that the residents have certainly sought regarding signage.
All right.
I hope my peers will entertain this motion or direction.
Does anybody have any additional questions regarding?
So I do. So what fiscal year are these planned for?
I'm sorry?
What fiscal year are these planned for?
I think this could move relatively quickly.
So it'd be for this fiscal, current
believe so,
fiscal
yes.
year. So how long have these street signs been like this?
I
We may have
can't
to ask for some help on that one.
Yeah.
David or Colleen may be able to help us on.
Can I speak?
Yes.
Those particular signs have been out there 20 years.
So, so the issue is that they don't look the same as what the rest of the cities looks like. So when were the ones for the city that look, they have the white thing and then the red, when was that done?
I believe those were done with a 2018. I would need to double check on that, but I believe those were done with
Okay.
a 2018 agreement.
So I guess my confusion is the timing. I'm not understanding if this has been an issue since at least 2018. Why is it that we're now having a discussion? I feel like it's what, $780? Did something happen that precipitated this? Was there an incident where first responders were confused of the city they were in? What happened that precipitated us having this discussion? If $780 is a relatively small amount, it's worth less than my shoes. I would have been happy to pay for them myself, but I'm just trying to understand, why now, why here, why not?
I think it comes
Years ago.
down, I'll make an attempt to do this when all the other green signs that we just referred to, they were also of the wooden variety and the red signage that you see on the existing 3 that we're talking about here. But when the city came in and redid the streets, the city took those old signs down and put the new signs up. So they're inconsistent. And so we've been working with the neighborhood, as we've already alluded to, on their water meters as well as the medians. And so this was wrapped into this particular discussion by a resident who raised this concern, who also coupled that with their management company in order to create some consistency at this particular time where all these conversations were going on. So I would hearken to say that perhaps the city didn't look at the consistency aspect of signage there in totality back in 2018. None of us around the table, perhaps with the exception of the mayor, and I'm not putting you on the hot seat, Mayor, for that, really thought about how that signage might impact differently for the eastern section versus the western section here. And again, it's a small a small gesture. It is on private property, as we've already alluded to, but I think it does create the opportunity for more consistency.
So have we done our mid-year review of the budget yet?
No.
Okay.
That should be coming in April. We'll finish mid-year timing, just March, and then in April, our attempts, we should be bringing it back.
So my understanding is that usually adjustments that are unbudgeted, regardless of the amount, typically take place either during or after that mid-year review. And I think this probably should have been brought up years ago because we would have been easily able to find the money for it. But knowing what I know now about grant issues, and I won't go into it any further, but grant issues and the significant sums of money that might be on or above $10 million that we might be responsible for, I'm concerned about spending anything more. That's where I'm at. That's just me.
I think we should be until after we figure out where we are at with those grants. I mean, that's coupled with Myra. We actually need to be on a spending moratorium until we can figure that out.
Councilman Baird,
How many houses are there in Oak Brook?
156.
156?
155. 156 address.
Here it comes.
So we're talking $4.60 per house? I feel for all the stuff going on there, but I'm trying to understand why we're even talking about this. That's all.
Anybody else have a comment?
Regardless of the dollar amount, you know, the justification in my mind for the 4 signs is that, you know, first responders would know precisely the sign they're looking for in responding to an emergency. These other signs and these other pictures, some of them look shorter. I don't know if they have the same reflective material on them as our city signs so that they show up with first responder lighting going to an emergency. So for that purpose alone, I would support replacing the 4 signs. That being said, I wouldn't go any further beyond, like to the blue triangles in the neighborhoods, because now we're starting to creep into a neighborhood, private property. But if it's the dollar amount that's a concern in light of other pending responsibilities, then we're talking about consistency in signs here for a cost of $700. Then why would we just spend an hour and a half talking about medians across the city at thousands and a couple of $100,000s of dollars? If we're in that much of a situation, then we close the spigot to all of these ideas, not just $700 worth of street signs. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you.
Nothing more to add.
Okay.
And I think the difference between this one and the other ones is that the other ones are talking about future fiscal year. Once we have the ability to figure out how all those pieces fit, right now we're talking about an unbudgeted expense for the current fiscal year.
We could move this to a future fiscal. Okay.
Just, and, you know, Councilman Baird asked why we're talking about this. Again, it's unbudgeted, even though it's a small dollar amount, but it's the big thing for me is the transfer from public to private. That's something that
Right.
really needs to be discussed with the
Right.
council when we make that move, so that's
Make the
why
announcement.
it's here. So public funds to private
And the biggest,
investment is always something we'll bring to you.
the biggest question is, will Pete cost more or less than
Just thinking about that.
$709?
We've already spent that money. That meter's running.
Touche.
I mean, I have no idea what the answer to that is.
So it looks like pause for now and fold it into a future budget discussion, or?
Disappointed if that's a pause. Am I hearing my peers say they want to pause for $709?
Do we know if this is an issue in any other neighborhoods?
I'd have to go check. This, with private streets, there's probably going to be some because usually, and sometimes when you have private streets, they'll have a different design standard, maybe a bronze pole or something else as well. This is the only place I'm aware of where there are different heights on different materials, but we'd have to check.
Why don't we maybe bring this back after
After we get the budget.
after we figure out the grant stuff?
Let me see.
And then if
It's up to
anything,
you.
we can
It's,
always have a discussion
okay.
about it in preparation for the next fiscal year.
All right, look, let me just save everybody a lot of time. Councilman Merritt and I will split the cost and pay for it. Just, when do you want to check?
It's disappointing to my peers.
We'll just pay for it. Okay,
I-
this is,
Yeah, it's,
let's just move on. And problem solved.
Well, you can't have a contract with the city, so I'll deduct it from our monthly bill, okay?
Well,
I mean,
I am volunteering to mow the
Yeah.
medians for 2 weeks
I accept your offer.
this summer.
Okay.
If that's acceptable with the council, I'm happy to take that as a credit off our bill. If you still don't want to do it,
thank you, Pete.
As long as y'all are comfortable with that, I just need guidance from the group. Pete's made the offer.
Show of hands.
no voting, no voting.
I was just
Sounds like
leaving it.
Pete and I
Show
will-
of preference.
Pete and I will make the arrangements to
Thank
take care
you.
of this through Pete. Thank you, Pete.
Thank
You're
you, Pete.
welcome.
And Pete,
All right, next up is A5, receive an update regarding the landfill solar farm project.
I'm not volunteering on that.
Thank you, Mayor.
You bet. We'll split it with you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Alex Formica, Sustainability Manager. I'm going to give an update on our landfill solar project. Project background, March 2022, City Council approved an authorization of an option agreement with BQ Energy, which has now been purchased by Clean Capital, to lease the former landfill site at 1399 Valley View, right next to the Citizens Collection Center off of Valley View and the George Bush Tollway. That project has been ongoing since then. The contractor was turnkey. They were working on studies, site surveys, engineering design. They submitted the permits at the end of last year. Completion of the project was estimated by the end of this current year. However, in January, the contractor notified city staff of changes to the expected electricity output of the site. February, they followed up and notified city staff of price changes that were much, much higher than previously proposed in their estimates. And then we received the letter from them to terminate the option agreement. So just for some context here, within the original RFP, the annual kilowatt hour output of the site was 13.6 million kilowatt hours, which exceeded what the city uses to power its municipal facilities. The design that they brought to us after they did all their engineering studies was 8.6, about 2/3 of what we currently use. So they had a drastic difference in what the projected output and the size of the array was going to be. So that had impacts on pricing, to which they stated that proposed electricity rate of 4.4 cents per kilowatt hour, that's just the energy-only fee, was no longer feasible. They provided alternative prices, a range of them, different term lengths, escalators, but on average, there was about a 75% increase in proposed amount compared to what they had originally done, and approximately 2 cents higher per kilowatt hour than the current electricity rate. The reasoning they were providing us is the smaller electrical output due to the system being smaller, the increased construction costs. There was a 38% increase from their original estimate, and the increased cost per watt for the interconnection. And that's when you're putting that power on the grid there, infrastructure upgrades that have to be taken place to have that power go safely onto the wires. So with that, a little bit more information. This is a former landfill site. It's been closed since the late 80s. There's very few feasible uses for it. It's one of the reasons solar is good on this one, because you don't have to disturb the cap. You don't have to go through as extensive a remediation to do that. There's an extremely high cost to do that, probably for this site, to dig it all up, haul it away, tens of millions of dollars. The city does own this, and we have a continued cost to mow and maintain the property. And during this option agreement, the city did receive multiple lease payments from Clean Capital, $10,000 annually while they were doing the work. So next steps, so the city will take ownership of all non-confidential documents from Clean Capital. So surveys, interconnection studies, everything that they've done that's non-confidential will take, so we aren't really starting from scratch. But we will have to re-release our RFP for the solar development on the site. Since we started this process over 2 years ago, some more progress has been made on this. There are nonprofits working in this space. RMI is one, and they have a partnership with Kansas State University on developing landfill or solar on brownfields, so industrial contaminated land and landfills. So we will be working with them to get some feedback on our RFP to try and make sure that it's efficient. And we will be continuing to evaluate the bids or the proposals received to determine if it's financially feasible for the project to proceed. So, and in the meantime, our current electricity contract expires in February of 2025. John Roach in Public Works, he'll be continuing to extend or get a new electricity contract through our traditional method. Lights are going to stay on. We'll just be kind of starting at the RFP process to find a different vendor for the landfill solar project. And so with that, I will take any questions that you have.
Councilman Merritt.
Disappointing.
Very much.
How far along was our prior contractor with TCEQ?
They had submitted all the permits by December 23. So TCEQ was still in the process of review when they put that on hold. So it didn't make it all the way through the permitting process. Our landfill is in pretty good shape because we have maintained it over time. So there's probably not as much work that TCEQ would have to do with issues, floodplain, different things like that, that other sites might have to do. So I think we're in probably pretty good shape on that, but it did not go all the way through completion.
That's unfortunate. Can the potential, I believe you called them RMI, take advantage of that particular proposal? Or since it's probably most likely a new proposal, will it have to start at step one with TCEQ?
So they will have to resubmit all the permits. We have access to most of those, so it won't necessarily be starting from scratch. One of the things that they did is the site survey as well. So we have that. That's current. So it won't be all the way from the start, but as far as the permitting process, whoever the new developer is, if they have a rate that's financially feasible for us and we move forward, they will have to submit both our local permits, and also TCEQ.
Thank
There
you.
should just be a little less research on the front end for them.
For the developer?
For the new one, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Al.
We'll have to resubmit. He's right. A lot of legwork's been done in terms of research. So it is starting from scratch, but a lot of stuff been done.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Shane.
Councilman Jackson.
So I understand the construction costs have gone up, interconnection costs have gone up, energy costs have gone up, but they stated one of the reasons for terminating the contract was smaller electrical output due to system being smaller.
Yes, so they were essentially not going to be able to sell as much electricity as they had previously estimated. So they were looking at selling 13 million kilowatt hours, 13.8, and dropping to 8 some odd million. So their economics changed based on that output.
So they lost market for solar power.
Essentially so,
basically.
because their estimated design differed so drastically from the engineered design.
Okay. And we don't think that a new entity is going to have similar challenges?
Well, I mean, I think it's worthwhile to see. We have put in some work onto this. So it would be interesting to see what other entities have. Some market conditions have changed from government funding perspectives. Our site being smaller, it's a possibility that it doesn't work out. Some of this money might be going towards larger scale facilities. If you think about economies of scale, building a 1.5 square mile one out in West Texas versus a 23 acre one in Farmers Branch. There's some issues with that, but there's maybe also some opportunity. We did receive other responses to the RFP when we originally submitted it. This one scored the highest based on price per kilowatt hour that they were providing, output. And so there are companies that work in this sphere. So I think it's worthwhile, since we have put the work in, to see if there's a pricing that's feasible. From a sustainability perspective, where I live, I mean, there's a lot of benefit to this, and there's not a lot of use for that site. It's been closed since the late 80s, and we haven't been able to do anything with it. The contracts that we will seek are turnkey, so they will cover the maintenance costs of that site, so we would lose the cost it takes to mow and maintain. That would be shifted on the developer, so there's a little bit of a savings in that. So it's, I think, based since we had other responses to the original RFP, it's worth seeing what the current market is. Also, our electricity costs have changed since, what we're paying on a contract from before to now, and they have gone up as well. So that might make the economics when we do some of our calculations different.
Okay. No further questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Baird?
No questions.
I'm
Councilwoman?
good, thank you, thank
Councilman
you.
Rowe? Okay. I do have a question regarding this. Obviously, we did not require any type of performance bond from this agreement like we would moving forward with construction projects in the city.
That's correct. And
Okay.
yeah, we're not out anything. They haven't done anything to the site. They haven't started any sort of construction.
Understood. Pete, I don't even know if it's legal for us to require or request something like that up at the beginning, only because, this went out to the media. We benefited from the PR aspect of this, and now we're sort of having to eat crow. Doesn't matter what BQ did, it's on us.
They had an option, and that's the difference. The way that's structured is they had an option to go forward, and there was nothing to compel them to go forward. So I don't know if there's any kind of product you can purchase out there, whether they put up some kind of financial guarantee or personal guarantee. But I don't think anybody's going to be interested in doing it if they've got to put some money up and lose that money. Maybe the option fee, maybe there's an option fee that's worthy, but if that was the case, we'd have people banging on the door.
Yeah, the only difference now is we can pretty much say for certain, like they didn't know about our zoning, we can tell, so if we go through this process again, in our RFP, we can tell them what the zoning is. Here's your setbacks, we've gone through all that now. So we get very definitive, here's the area you got to work with. Before we didn't necessarily have all that. We know the topography very well, we've seen the design come through now. So I think we can be really clear in our acreage you can use, which will help some. So maybe we don't go down the option 3 route next time. That's kind of where we.
Well, it's unfortunate that this is not happening, and again, somebody's not going to go look at BQ, they're going to think, oh, what did the city do? And,
But Mayor, they did incur the expense of submitting those applications to TC&Q.
Yeah.
And we know that's not cheap.
Yeah.
Understood.
And the lease payments to us, but I
So-
understand your.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, just, I hope that we can possibly find somebody else that would be interested in doing this, because I do believe the benefits of the project would be a positive for our city, so that's it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. So our food is here. I'm thinking of, let's take like a 10-minute break, get food, come back and listen. We'll probably have executive session after the council meeting. So we've just got too many items to move forward through. So let's take 10 minutes, grab food, and come back and resume with A6. That work? Tom? Thank you. Welcome back. We'll resume our study session with item A6, which is discuss the neighborhood revitalization programs and provide feedback to the city staff. Oh, we're at 5:13. Thank you.
Okay, we've been talking about neighborhood revitalization for a few times, and can y'all hear me okay? That's better. Okay, we've been talking about neighborhood revitalization a few times, and after feedback, we have crafted some ideas for discussion. First, we're going to talk about demo rebuild, and then we're going to talk about neighborhood renaissance. So for tonight, I want to show you the table of the existing demo rebuild program. These are the tiers. They've been the tiers for many years now. And this shows the improvement value, which also means home value, not land value, on the appraisal district. And this is how the program works. Depending upon where the structure or the improvement falls with the improvement value on the Dallas County Appraisal District, that determines which tier that applicant can apply for. So we have the improvement values, cash grant, city property tax rate. And then we showed the last 4 years. Historically, I think we were asked last time about how many do each of the levels. So this kind of shows you the participation level at the different tiers. I included the target area just for discussion purposes. These are the improvement values. So again, not the land values, the improvement values alone. And the change from 2014 to 2023, we used quintiles. So you can see how the improvement values have increased significantly over the past 9 years. The lower value, actually, it's important to note, the lower value properties got less valuable, and the higher end properties, the top 2 tiers, became significantly more valuable. That would be homes that are remodeled, homes that are well maintained. Those values went up significantly over the last 9 years. And then demo rebuild current rebate participants. I was guessing around 20 that are getting rebates right now, but we have 20 more existing recipients right now receiving cash grant or rebate with completed projects. So that means they've either demoed their house or the house is completed to get the rebate. But let's say a few months ago we approved a project, they're probably not receiving any cash right now. So we have 20 future recipients within 24 months or less. So they're approved and probably under construction. This slide was asked for the demographic profile of the target area, and this is just good information to have. We have demographic profile from Esri for the entire city. We have it for the target area. We can draw a polygon. There are a lot of ways where you can extrapolate information of certain areas if you wish. So it shows the population and the average household income, things of that nature. And again, this is our table for the Dallas County area median income. When we talk about AMI, we mean area median income. And when we talk about specifically the Builders of Hope program, they use this AMI table. Just food for note. And the Builders of Hope project, once again, I know you all are familiar with the addresses and the square footage, and these are the sales prices. And this is the website. So for anybody interested that's watching or here tonight that wants to know how to apply and more information, Builders of Hope has a link that has an application they can fill out, and it has all of the information to get started with the discussion. And this is the last slide to talk about neighborhood renaissance and where we are right now and what we want to do in the future. I can go back to the demo rebuild slides if we want to start with that conversation, if we want to make any modifications to demo rebuild or talk about demo rebuild, or if we want to leave it alone tonight, talk about it later. No? Okay, then we can talk about neighborhood. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're
Go
fine.
ahead.
Oh, or we can just talk about neighborhood renaissance. So y'all let me know if you want me to stop at this page, go back.
So I don't know, I thought this presentation was going to be more just informational this evening to get a better sense of where we were. But if anybody has questions up to this point, please go ahead and ask now.
Part of what I'm asking Allison to do is gear y'all up for the CBO discussion. Your direction that you provide on the houses we're holding, the properties we're holding, will be a direct correlation to the strategic plan and critical business outcome. So we brought back every aspect that had questions or the request that we received as well from council during the last presentation. Demo rebuild was one of those. Do we have the right balance in there? And then also neighborhood renaissance. What are we doing? What do we want to do? It sounds like we've stopped buying, but then how do we want to translate to a CBO? And do we want the CBO to maybe update to say we want to return those properties to the private sector in a responsible manner or something to that effect? Basically, are we holding? Or how would you like us to approach those properties? Again, council will have final decision on any land sales, but what approach and model are we looking for with the properties we have? It sounds like we have clear direction for now to pause on buying. And if you do any changes to demo rebuild, my request would be that would fold into the budget process because you would change the budgetary impact. So budget process is up and running. We're starting the budget, so it's looking for general themes from the council and kind of where you want us to explore more. But the real thing we're looking for is there a philosophy or approach you want us to apply to the strategic plan for the properties we're holding? Because there is a cost of maintaining those properties and they're sitting vacant, and just having that conversation with council. What does our approach need to be? The approach got us here was land banking and trying to make a more substantial change in the target area. What do we want our change to be, or change in approach to be as a council from a philosophy standpoint of unloading those properties or holding if you also choose. But I would recommend not holding because there's a cost associated with holding.
How long does it take to continue to sell the lots to Builders of Hope? What's the timeline on that?
Right now, since we sold 5 in November, right now we don't have a plan unless y'all want to say tonight sell 5 more or 10 more. We don't have a plan to sell the lots until we see some of the houses in the ground and we kind of go through the process with them because we are new to this with them. And that was the thinking of just selling 5 at first, is just to kind of see the look and feel of the homes and finish out. And then if everything seems to be running smoothly, we can talk to them about selling 10 or selling 15. So we just kind of wanted to see how 5 went. And so that's the theory. So that's why we're in a hold. We can talk to them about future sales price with them for the next 10 at some point if council gives me that direction. But right now we're paused in selling to them until we see some finished homes.
Is there any reason why on number 2, sell lots on MLS to put a deed restriction on them?
So that's another consideration. So we could just, another thought is sell all the lots with no restriction, or we can sell the lots with a restriction of the square footage. We can't sell lots with a restriction of a sales price for a future owner, but the square footage, yes.
Right.
We could. And so we can talk about that too, of if we're pausing buying, that we know how to write our critical business outcome. If we have some direction of let's sell some lots and see if a restriction of a square footage would get a buyer to come along, perhaps it would. It would depend on what we sell the lot for too, in the open market. So we can explore that. As Builders of Hope starts to pull their permit and get some houses in the ground, I would like to kind of see them before we keep going.
Yeah, I don't think it would make good sense right now to sell additional lots to Builders of Hope, not having seen the product, and let's see what the demand for that product is going to be. You know, our goal, and as we said at the groundbreaking ceremony, it's not to get people moving to Farmers Branch from elsewhere. These homes are built for the neighborhood in hopes that people within the neighborhood will take advantage of these homes. And then maybe that will provide some additional fuel to what's going on here, where individuals could engage with Builders of Hope privately, and the city is not in that business. It also doesn't make sense for us to sell 20 lots that we have right now in the open market, because that's just going to drive the price down on everything. If we want to drive the price down, doing something with Builders of Hope, that's one strategy that we might employ, okay? But if they just, if we just release these lots for sale on the MLS, then there's no restriction and somebody could do whatever they want.
That's not true if we put a deed restriction on it.
You could, it may not be as easy to sell that way. At least with Builders of Hope, we think we know what we're going to get. Now we just need to see what that is. And so I think the prudent thing to do would be to wait in that regard. It's, we've been holding on to these lots, so keeping them a little bit longer, just so we can see the fruits of what we've entered into is probably not that big of a deal.
And it could be like late summer when we could maybe start to see some of that, and I'd like to kind of walk it and see it as a thought. But that might be the timing, if I had to guess.
So, and I'll make it quick because I know we've got the 6 o'clock meeting to go to as well. So I guess in terms of the demo rebuild, I don't see there being a need for any changes. I don't think there should be, so I think it should stay the same. In terms of the neighborhood renaissance, I like the idea that Councilwoman Tina Bennett Burton was bringing up about selling the lots on MLS, but adding a restriction to limit the square footage.
Okay, well, I can come up with some prices of what the land could be in a square footage and bring that back if that's a consideration of what could maybe make sense on the open market.
Yeah, and I know that having a restriction on, in terms of the square footage might affect whether somebody's willing to buy something, but as I think through this, and I looked at the resolutions, I think we sold some of these lots to Builders of Hope. The cheapest one was $45,000 and the one that was the most expensive was $65,000. So I'm sure if we sold it, we'd be able to at least make more than that in return. So even if let's say no one would buy it for $300, if we dropped it to $250, we'd still be better off than where we were with Builders of Hope.
Yeah, we sold for the land value at the time.
Yeah.
And then interesting, the land value did go up in the trade area. But I can bring some numbers back that make sense for what I think someone would buy and then be able to build for, because we're still wanting a one-story product, I imagine. Okay. Easy. So then we are clear that we're pausing buying for now and we're maintaining, and do we want to put, well, I'll just bring the metrics back and then we can decide if it's 1 or 5 or how many on the open market. Does that sound like a plan?
Yeah, I think we can at least just test it out and see if
Okay.
people are interested, and if not, maybe a adjustment in price. And I think it's important that if the money from selling these properties came from the target area, that it be used in a way to reinvest into that area to
Yeah.
address critical concerns of the residents, whether it be
Yeah.
street lighting or safety or whatever other concerns they have. I think that might be a good use of the money. I know that's for a future discussion, but I'm sort of just thinking ahead of what happens with that money once we sell lots.
Okay. I like it.
Allison, what's the cost if we didn't sell the lots and we maintained them? What's our cost?
To mow the lot's about $35 each lot, $35 each lot
Okay.
during the season when the grass grows. It's about 8 months out of the year,
Is that
So about-
35 weekly or monthly?
weekly, for like a 60 by 120 lot. And remember, it doesn't have a house on it, so they're mowing an entire parcel of grass. And a lot of times we have trees that fall, so there's cleanup and debris associated with things. And then when we have a house demolition, we have to clean up as well. So, but I would say on average, it's a $35 fee.
So 700 per week?
Yeah, $700 per week.
I'm just hesitant to list the lots for sale if it's costing us $120 a month for 20 lots. I guess I don't really understand what the hurry is to sell the lots, to list them, whether they have restrictions on them or not. This was a plan to buy these lots and sell them on the market, or as we've found with Builders of Hope, potentially a program that really is good for our city and good for our residents and good for the neighborhoods. cost to me in holding those lots seems somewhat minimal. And maybe selling them seems a bit premature.
I could bring some metrics back about selling a lot with a deed restriction of a certain square footage and what the price could be that maybe we could yield, and we could try a lot and see. We could have a test.
Yeah, we don't have to sell all 20,
Right.
right?
We
We're just
could,
gonna
we
sell-
could always put it for sale on
Yeah, I
MLS.
think you mentioned like somewhere between 1 and 5 would be the test.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have 20.
okay.
I want to go back to the demo rebuild. I think we need to potentially look at the distribution of the property tax rebate. And while we have participation levels that look fairly distributed, excuse me, across that, I think we're really high in the, obviously in the 7-year with $150,000 and over. I'd like to look at the ROI on that if we shorten that to some period, and I think I've mentioned before that I'd be open to, something less than 7 years on that larger number. But that seemed a long time for a rebate, and we've not made changes to this since its inception, I believe.
Since 2017, we've made
2017.
4 changes since 2009.
Right. So I think the market, while it's an incentive, I've said that before, I'm still valuing an incentive, but I don't think we need to be that long in the incentive.
Could we do, instead of starting at 3 years, could we start at 4? Do 4, stay at 4 because there's really, that's the lowest category. And then 5, 5. So 4, 4, 5, 5.
4, 4, 5,
So,
So we'd combine 65 to 100,000 to try to incentivize that lower group. And then combine the 100,000 up at 5 years, something like that.
It's possible.
You got a comment?
So this incentive, this is to get hopefully people to consider Farmers Branch instead of going elsewhere. That's what incentive provides. And if you look at improvement values, the number of the number of properties within improvement values of $65,000 or less is declining because they are, the market is just driving the value of homes as well as the appraisal district. So those numbers need to change. And so I mapped out something which I'll present to you and you can think about bringing to the next meeting. But, that $65,000 improvement value may be as much as 90 now due to inflation and movement in the market. And so before we just arbitrarily start throwing stuff out, I think there needs to be a scientific look at what are homes valued at, what are improvement values valued at, and what is it we're trying to do? What's our strategy here? It's not just throwing out a number and saying, oh, these people need something, these people don't. No, we're trying to, this program, I should say, was designed to try to affect change in the city and incentivize improving housing stock, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, and it's still truth that 80% of the homes in Farmers Branch are over 50 years old. Many are over 60.
I don't have that with me tonight, but if I had to guess,
Yeah,
probably.
that's still there.
Okay.
So when you look at how people are living today, nobody's saying that you can't live in some of these older homes, but people want to live differently. And so if you looked at today's standards, maybe that 60-year-old home could be considered functionally obsolete by today's standard, but that doesn't mean it's uninhabitable. Certainly by no stretch of the imagination is anybody suggesting that. But when you look at what the market is driving for Farmers Branch and the value of our location, then when the opportunity presents itself, especially in the private sector, for people to buy homes and they take them down and they're buying, even if it's $150,000 structure value, and they're building a $850,000 structure value, we win. We win. Takes us a little bit longer to get our money, and that's only if the coupon clipper redeems their coupon every year. We know that doesn't always happen. But assuming that it did, because the individual has to apply for that incentive every year in order to get that benefit, just on the city taxes alone, that is a big plus for our community. And it's a selling tool that helps sell part of Farmers Branch, not all of it, part of it. And it also benefits the school district tremendously. So I'll submit what I put together. You can include it in your next presentation for consideration.
Okay.
And then I think that I'd love to have some more discussion on the neighborhood revitalization program or neighborhood renaissance program at some future date also.
The good news about demo rebuild is if we make any changes, perhaps we could align it with the fiscal year of October 1st, so we've got a little breathing room and time. Because this year we already have budgeted for our obligations. So we're not, in a hurry, we don't have to be in a hurry right this second to change the tiers. But I didn't bring recommendations with me because I wasn't sure which way and what the goal was for tonight, so.
Well, I know Councilman Roman has been very concerned about the direction of the Renaissance program, and I'd like the opportunity to sit down with you and just discuss strategy and see what we could come up with together.
Okay.
But I will say that in terms of, I think, today's discussion, this then leads us into the next one of the critical business outcomes. And it sounds like the one that's still in question is CBO5, which is directly related to the result of this one.
2 and 5 both play into this. And so I don't feel like we can move forward until we have some direction on this, because this discussion is intimately tied to 2 and 5.
Yes, and we could, make some modifications to the language about managing and maintaining city-owned properties. That seems simple enough. If we had to come up with language for CBO, but I know Jawari is going to speak next about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're asking me right now, my request would be CBO5 is taken out. And for now, we go with figuring out, I guess, option 4, which was at the end of your slides. I think it was it was one that I just made up, that Tina had brought up, option 4, which is.
I didn't see that.
Or 5.
Right. So selling the lots on MLS with a restriction, but obviously we're going to first test it out and see, is there appetite for that? Is the issue the price? Do we need to modify that? And then maybe next year it's a different discussion, but I think in order for our staff to move forward, they need the critical business outcomes, which then is this here. So my mind at least is made up on that. I was coming here with the intention of what's the final verdict on people's opinions on those items. That's how I saw it. So I came prepared with that mindset. And maybe I'm just alone in that, but.
I thought that's what we were doing because they needed the CBOs finalized.
Well, and so part of that is it's going to trigger the budget process. So as we start selling these lots, depending on how they were funded, we'll determine where the money goes. And so we'll budget the revenues appropriately. So our stance and approach from the council that you all give us will directly impact how we build the budget, because I'm going to build revenues in if I know we're selling. If we're not selling, I'm going to build expenses in, because then I'm budgeting to cover $700 per week, which is almost $3,000 per month during the summer months, which most people are starting to mow pretty soon. It's, lawn's already starting to grow. So it's one of those, it's small numbers, but I like to be accurate. So it's just understanding the direction for councils, how we'll build it. And that tells me, from what I've heard so far is on the CBOs, is the stance is responsibly selling properties, not acquiring properties is the direction the council seems to be discussing at this point in time, but definitely not buying properties is also what I've heard is. And that's where Jawaria will further clarify as she pulls the CBOs in, and then that tells me and the finance team exactly, we'll kind of get a threshold for what you're looking to sell. Is it 5 lots next year? Because some of these might be in this year as we start testing the waters, but is it 5 or 10 next year? By then you'll know how Builders of Hope performed, and if that's a good fit or the private market's a better fit, whatever y'all would like to look at for how the impact to the neighborhood would be. But my concern would be holding 20 lots indefinitely in perpetuity is also a challenge, just because Allison collects quite a few fan mails from code enforcement sometimes, so we got to get that mowed. And
Yeah, frenemies.
I didn't, go ahead,
Oh,
please.
although Councilman Jackson said it's not a whole lot to hold on to, and we're losing out on having a house there paying us taxes.
Agreed.
And I've never been a fan of the city being in the real estate business. So I would like us to sell at least, I guess we're talking about 5 lots initially, and see how that goes, with the goal eventually to divest ourselves of all of those. And just, again, I'd like to see us incentivize what we're trying to get done, but not by buying houses and tearing them down.
So I think for Neighborhood Renaissance, if I'm hearing y'all correctly, we're going to pause on purchasing. We'll bring back some ideas of what we could sell a lot for with the restriction and sell.
I'm not sure if we have a
But-
general consensus on that.
Okay, sorry.
I haven't heard over here.
That's right. I'm sorry, Councilman Merritt. I haven't heard you speak at all.
Well, I think, I understand the concern about holding property, but I think we've held property for a long time now in order to get into an agreement with Builders of Hope and the like, if you will, because I know there are others in that particular space. And holding property at the city level is the only tool that we can, lever, if you will, in putting deed restrictions on these properties. So I'm cautious about not wanting to, in the future, buy, additional properties. But I think right now, we have these 20. I know there's a direction across the table to sell, to get out of this business. But I think we run the risk, even though with deed restrictions, of, exacerbating a problem we're trying to fix. And, making this, not doing the right thing in this particular space. So I'm careful with that. I do believe, if I heard the gentleman's from Builders Hope say they're hoping to be done by the end of December. So, that would give us the opportunity to look at how that's going into not the coming budget, but the budget after that. And I would hate to see us, shortchange ourselves. If it's an opportunity to sell a couple of properties, make some money, yes, but we have a predominant group of properties in the target area that we have control over. If you let the market be the market, you're gonna get something different than what we really hope for, in my opinion, or nothing at all, and because it won't change. So,
And nothing's to say that those, you put them out in the open market, that they may not be attainable housing. They may not be in line with what Builders of Hope is doing. waiting
Probably
a little
wouldn't be.
longer to see the product, see the acceptance or the demand for it, I think at this point is the more prudent thing to do. And then we come back and reassess, all right, man, those things were snapped up. Let's do some more, okay? Again, we're not building these homes, or these 5 aren't being built for people from Dallas to move here, or people from Carrollton to move here. They're hopefully being built to help our own residents that are in the area already stay in the area and upgrade themselves.
Builders of Hope mentioned people in the neighborhood in the city get priority in the application process. However they go through their application process. So that is the difference too. And might I say, cute front porches. Just got to throw it out there.
So,
But didn't we talk about changing the zoning to take care of your concern?
Yeah, but the deed restriction would do that if she
Right.
put the right words in.
Right.
I think if we did a rezoning, it'd apply to everybody.
Everybody.
It would apply to everybody.
That's
There-
what I'm talking about.
Current and new.
As
For the
as houses are purchased, torn down, and rebuilt.
For non-city owned land, for non-city owned lots, you mean? I think there's unintended consequences with that, but I'd rather the planning department bring those things forward because that would be a rezoning and all the things to consider for that for the private sector.
I just don't see the hurry in rushing out to sell 5 lots.
It was just a test of market.
Yeah, I understand, but if Builders of Hope is gonna be done by December, isn't that what you just said? We don't have that much time before we see success or not from that. And what we'll be looking to gain to sell lots before then that may have some restrictions on them. In my mind, it's not enough of a gain to rush out to market to do that.
So
And I think that assumes that one's opinion might change after seeing the final product.
Sure.
And so that assumption is not true with me, at least. Whether I see the product or not, I'd be in opposition to that project.
So you don't think the homes that Builders of Hope is building are necessarily viewed as a positive change to everyone in the neighborhood? Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
So we're not in agreement here.
Yep.
We're not, we're all over the place. So
No, I think this side of the table is in agreement.
I think we've got 3 people who are in favor of one strategy, and we have 2 council members who have differing opinions, and then you've got your opinion as well.
And again, I'm not saying I'm not favorable to testing the market with 5 or fewer lots.
Allison, can you tell us, like, I know the lot 4 houses down from me on Veronica has been empty for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
Do you have how long we've owned each one?
I do, and the Veronica one's different because we listed it for sale. We went through a process with a person, and then they dropped out of contract.
Right.
And so that one's kind of a funny one, but we're listing that one in Ermine this spring. So we'll be done with those 2, and that's non-target area.
Right.
And Cloverdale is about to close. So just those 3.
I'm thinking of what Councilman Jackson says, and, if we've only had them for a year, most of them, then
Oh.
I can see, let's wait a little longer, but if we've had these for 3, 4, 5, 6
Yeah.
years.
The target area is a little bit different because as we were buying them, then we were holding them. So historically, target area is different. And the Veronica Way one, or Veronica Lane one,
Road, that's okay.
it broke contract and back and forth with that one.
Sure.
But anyway, and so I think I can come back with some metrics after I study what could sell and so we could kind of maybe test the market if y'all want with one lot and just see or not. But I could bring that in a memo form or study session form. whatever, I would just need to do a little bit of homework. Do you have a format preferable?
I think 3 lots maximum. 3 lots maximum as a test. We're not gonna lose much, we're not missing much to gain if we just test the market with 3 lots.
You talking about open market?
Yeah,
Open market sale?
Right.
No restriction?
well,
With deed restrictions.
with or without restriction.
I want him to say that.
I'm indifferent to that because we're only talking about 3 lots.
Hey,
I would do 1 lot and see what happens. You can't control exterior building materials anymore. We could years ago. So
I'm concerned.
we have a few
with-
things to consider, but I can
I'm
bring it back.
concerned with being consistent with the neighborhood, okay? And we've seen what happens when somebody buys a house that is not consistent with the neighborhood, and they're using every square inch of the property, and then they build something 2 stories that looks so out of place, okay? In the Renaissance area, in that target area, we initiated, I believe, proper restrictions to help ensure that those homes would be consistent with what's around them size-wise.
Just for the Builders of Hope lots.
Yes.
Private sector can build whatever they want.
Yes. So, I don't understand what the rush is. I really don't. And, I mean, we can talk about philosophy and whatnot and try to come to a consensus on that in order to give staff clearer direction. I know you already have your mind made up, but I'm not sure that others do also. And I think this is a topic that's going to need a little more discussion. So we're not going to finish study session right now. I want to give people time to use the restroom, go downstairs. We will
Can we
resume.
go around the room and see if people's mind is made up before we just assume?
We're going to resume that downstairs, and we'll have it after the public meeting and regular agenda. Then we will come back to study session down there. Then we will come up here and have executive session.
But for this discussion, we're ending it now. Is that what
So
I'm
we're going
hearing?
to table this till after, yes.
Should table it?
I'd like to make a comment about the demolition rebuild program if it's
Okay.
not out of, I know we're talking about the other program, the Renaissance program, but the tiers. I think that we've built enough attractiveness to Farmers Branch and our location alone is of high value that I think we need to squeeze these tiers. And I believe it was Councilman Merritt that said 7 years is kind of a long time. Cap it at 5. If people want to move to Farmers Branch, they're going to do that for more reasons than just saving a little bit of tax money. I think that's a good incentive. But I think we've reached a point where that's not necessarily attracting people to Farmers Branch. It's just simply sweetening the pot with all of the other.
Okay.
And I don't think we need to give away as much.
Okay. Well, we'll have more dialogue on this whole thing after regular agenda.
Okay.
So we're going to recess at 5:51. Still have 2 items.